Alright, the stream should now be live. Can confirm it is live. How is everyone doing today?
Pretty tired.
Yeah. Just a typical, it's a lazy Saturday.
What do you say, Tricky?
I'm alive.
Good.
It's always a good state to be in.
I actively try avoiding the other thing.
It's kind of your job, I guess.
Wait, does it really suck in? I guess I never used it for the chat. I just used it for video.
Yeah, it's pretty bad on the chat.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess it's super small.
Well, I mean, you also have to consider, like, when you load up the keyboard, it, like, does all types of weird things, right? Because
Oh,
the keyboard also
God.
takes up parts of the screen.
Oh God, no. And I have to disappoint so many people today. They wanted to be as fun as last time.
Oh, with Blueprint?
No, the AMR stream.
Oh. It's not going to be as fun as that. We can take down AMR another time. It's a lot easier for us to deal with than Ret. Because people shouldn't be simming for that.
That's
I'm gonna have to say that if anyone's watching, I think the AMR saga is probably over now. As far as Ret goes.
4-hour stream? Let's go. Do you want to go for 24-hour?
How about we try to, like, get past 30 minutes?
Let's say 40 minutes.
Okay.
If anyone's new here, we usually wait a few minutes while people filter in to chat before we start. Because also Twitch takes like 5 minutes to send out a notification that the stream is live for some reason.
Shrike, I already analyzed your Paladin. Message me for results.
How would you get out of bed to watch a stream when you can watch a stream in bed? You got scammed.
Maybe Trekkie told her, Wally. Like, did you ever think of that?
Right.
The what? What did I do?
I was wondering why Ali was here.
Oh.
Yeah, because my brother.
I wonder.
Because Jade knows Ali.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Huh?
You figure that he would have told her, like, right?
Maybe.
Or I don't know if I'm blind or if I missed the notification, but I'm going to assume it's gone out now because it's been 5 minutes, so we can go ahead and get started
Yeah,
here.
I had one.
So, welcome to our first consecutive Prot stream. It is a great achievement for Paladins of the world.
Why are you toxic?
Yeah, stop being toxic.
And as you can see, we got another special guest. We have Trekkie. And
Hi, Edwin.
And I will let him introduce himself and we'll get into it.
Actually, I'm gonna go first. So thanks, Skeletor. Sorry.
I will
Sorry,
be
we have
quiet
this
then.
all scripted out. We have a script here, okay? I'm trying to follow the
You didn't
script.
send me the script.
Yes, we did.
So welcome to another Prot stream. Yeah, I know it's shocking that we're actually streaming again. Apparently, like, the streams are very, very infrequent.
You can't say, yes, we did Wooly, then link me the script.
So yeah, we have a special guest. Most people, I think, know Trekkie, but we'll definitely get into him, and we'll give him a second to introduce himself. But before we actually get to Trekkie, Wally, did you want to do the Holy Shield thing now before we like deep dive into Trekkie?
I'll just give it a quick TLDR.
Sure.
So in the beta, we got told that Holy Shield was just a flat 40% damage reduction. We've looked into it deeper now, and we also found something different. So it's just a normal block, essentially, right? And the way that blocks work, the base of your block value and the enemy. The enemy has a K value. That's usually like 11,000 something. No, 1100 in the current raid. No, it is 11,000, right? Yes, 11,000 in the raid. However, environmental hits have 6,300. So just blocks are stronger against environmental hits. That's pretty much it. Very TLDR. There's a pin in the protection channel if you want to.
Yeah, we have a pin. We'll read it over. We'll answer any questions. We'll probably deep dive into like how we did it, how Wally did it, maybe in a future stream. Maybe we can do that. So, but yeah, definitely things are changing in some of the theory crafting space. So let's just hop into talking to Trekkie. So we invited Trekkie on because Trekkie's a friend of our Discord. He's a friend of Wally. Wally's a fridge boy. I'm no longer a fridge boy, unfortunately. Wally's a fridge boy. So Trekkie's a friend of ours. He hangs out in Discord, answers questions. So we thought we'd have him on. We consider him a good friend. So Trekkie, do you want to take a couple minutes and introduce yourself for those that don't know?
Yeah, sure. I'm Trekkie, and I've been streaming and playing WoW for a couple of years now. I don't know how many years I've actually been streaming, but it's been a few years. And before that, I've obviously raided in top guilds such as Method, and now currently in a top 10 guild, and also otherwise known as Trekkie's Guild, if you know. But I played in the top. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, I played in top guilds for the last 6 or 7 years, and usually, almost always, stay true to my Paladin. That's always been my main throughout, even though I've been jumping in on other characters depending on the content being a little bit too hard for Paladins and a little bit too easy for other classes.
Like monks and bears.
Yeah, monks or bears or demon hunter.
Warriors. DK is this tier as well.
Demon
I'm
hunter.
not Demon Hunter. Who plays Demon Hunter?
So how long would you say you've been playing WoW, just generally then?
I started playing in TBC, 2 months after TBC came out. But I didn't re-roll my Prot Paladin until a little bit after Sunwell.
And then when did you start tanking? Was it right away? Or did you start in a different role?
I started, my first character ever was a mage. So I played mage mostly through TBC. And then at some point in TBC, I think this was when Suleiman came out, I had a Paladin alt that I actually intended to play Holy on. But Suleiman came out, and it was really hard for our guild to split the tanks, because obviously that was a 10-man instance, so we split it 2 groups. And we just always ended up needing tanks, so I started gearing my Paladin for that, and then I started really enjoying it, and then eventually I ended up re-rolling.
And you mentioned like how you've always been in these top guilds, or you have been in top guilds like Method, and we, I mean, that's generally publicly known. Like, how did you kind of get into that space of being in these top guilds? Like, how did you drift towards there? you like discovered, recruited? Like, how would you kind of describe that process of getting into one of those guilds?
It's pretty interesting, actually. I was just playing in. We had our own guild, or like my own guild, many years ago. This was in before Wrath of the Lich King came out, and then at some point, a spot opened up in a guild called Memento Mori at the time, which was a Swedish-only guild again. We ended up getting Lich King 25th, which was way higher than, I don't even know what world rank we had before, but it was decent, but it was a good server ranking, which made a little bit of noise. And then I joined Memento Mori. We got world 25th, and at that point, Memento Mori then said that we're gonna stop being a guild. And it turned out that someone who knew me from the other server who had joined Method, and they basically contacted me and said, "Hey, Method's looking for a tank. Would you consider applying?" And that's basically how I did. So I joined Method late Wrath of Lich King, and played there for 5 years.
What was it like tanking with Skull?
It's a lot of fun. I've played with many people as well now. Sko is usually the guy that jumps in last and just like does his thing kind of well, compared to a lot of other tanks. So I don't know. It's interesting. He's not very threatening to tank with or anything like that, as he's a big guy in real life, you know. So it's actually very chill.
At the point where you joined Method, this was early Kata, late Wrath, yes?
Late Wrath, yeah, during
Yeah.
Lich King farm, yeah.
Yeah. How established were they at that point? And how much did they like progress with the time you being there?
Method was obviously very established. I think they had I don't know the full history in like TBC then, but they did end TBC with a bang, getting world second on Kill Jaden. But I didn't get set out to join a world first guild. When I joined Method, they had gotten, I think, top 8 or 9 on Lich King. I'm a little bit unsure. I think they were a lot higher in 10-man Lich King, because there was obviously kind of both of those at the same time. There's obviously a weird tier where you only had X amount of pulls per week, whatever. But yeah, I joined them as a top 10 guild-ish.
And then in Kata is when they really took off.
Yeah, I guess at some point.
Do you think that's a coincidence?
No, I don't think so. Well, the thing is, like, when you get a lot of people who just suddenly like, you obviously have a solid guild, everyone plays well, and that before we went into Cataclysm, it felt like everyone's competition level wasn't as high as the moment we actually started. But I think everything just kind of clicked. You have a decent guild or a really good guild, and then at some point you just notice everyone's mentality is kind of lined up. Everyone's pushing for the same thing, and then you go hard, like really hard, and it really proved to be very successful for us, at least.
Okay. So you mentioned that you stream. So how long have you been streaming like WoW generally, and what is that kind of like?
I think I remember doing a couple of streams earlier. Like I think one of my first ones was Firelands, and then a few streams doing. We did the vodka race as well, vodka method race back in Dragonstone, and I streamed those races as well. But it didn't really get super serious until Throne of Thunder, I believe, right after at the end of Throne of Thunder. That's when I really started. Like, I quit my job and just started streaming, basically.
I remember sometime during late Siege of Orgrimmar, there was another event like that. Were you in that? I don't remember at all. So
I don't. Let's see. We did the. I think we did the Firelands. Okay, so what you're remembering is the BlizzCon raid, which we did.
yes, that's the one.
Yes, I was in there. Method did BlizzCon raids twice, and Siege of Orgrimmar was one, and then Highmaul was the other one. And I was on stage for the second one, but I was present on both. Yeah.
Yeah, that was against Midwinter, right?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember
Both times, yeah.
I remember Sloop practicing. They were practicing on stream.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So recently you haven't been streaming Mythic Progress. You did after you left Method. Is that something you kind of miss doing, streaming Mythic Progress?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I miss there, and if I had my way, I would like to have the guild stream as well. But at the end of the day, I'm not the only person who plays in the guild, so obviously it's totally the guild's decision. And I did join Null Total knowing that they're not a fan of streaming, and that was perfectly fine by me. At that point, I just wanted to play in a serious guild. They were going for top 10-ish, and while we landed on 12th for there, we broke the top 10 for BOD at least. So I'm very happy about that, and I really enjoy playing in the guild. But I do miss streaming as well. We streamed after Method, I joined both Prime and then on Nihilum and then Prime, which we were streaming content and top 20 level, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of those kills were the first kill kind of thing that was actually being streamed because we were streaming everything.
Right.
And I do miss that. There's definitely a lot of parts that I miss about that. Yeah.
So
Geralt,
really, sorry,
you
go ahead, Wally.
Okay, so lately you've been streaming games like Satisfactory and what's the other one?
Subnautica.
Yes.
Subnautica.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of other WoW YouTubers and content creators who've been doing the same. Do you think WoW can still support content creation?
I definitely do think so. I do see. I think we see a lot of very successful WoW streamers as well that basically only play WoW as well, and I think it does, but it depends a little bit on the content. Now, me and obviously Slew, he does about a bit of variety here and there as well, trying to branch it to that. I would say that I feel like it's more of an old streamer thing than WoW streamer thing, because we're interested in playing more games. We're interested in seeing, like, just getting along with our community in more than one scenario. And then also at the same time, we're both raiders. If you look at some of the Mythic Plus players that are becoming very popular on Twitch or has been very popular on Twitch, Mustard Bro for one, Dr. J, they play a lot of just Mythic Plus because they have very repeatable content. That's what they're known for, and that's what they do. And I think for them, there's a lot more opportunity for that, and a lot of people that's gone into Mythic Plus. But as a raider, it's a lot harder to just do that one thing. So you kind of have to branch out you can branch out into World of Warcraft as well, because there's endless of content in Mythic Plus, and you can make it fun and engaging with viewers. But also, a lot of us have been streaming for a long time and want to try something new and see if that's successful or not.
Yeah, like even if you look at like Belly Law or Preach, like they're even going into more general areas of where they're headed, right?
Yep.
Can't stream
And
if you're banned.
I think
I can't stream
but I think a lot of that has to do that they're established and they want to enjoy more than just WoW, and not because WoW is limited or they're bored of it, but because there are so many other games as well, and very few people play one game and one game only. Even if you only stream one game, you might play other games on the side. So if you have that streamer mentality, why not stream it? Why not have fun with your community while you play other games? Then WoW, it's not really like cheating on WoW kind of thing, but like you're just enjoying a Twitch community, and that's kind of what it's all about at the end of the day, I think.
So in terms of your audience knows you for WoW. Like, how do you either transition them over to the other to different stuff to engage them, or even build and expand that audience to engage different viewers?
That's really hard, honestly, I gotta say. And it's like a lot of I built up a community over a long period of time, but a lot of people still just watching for WoW and are mainly interested in that. Usually when I stream other games, people jump in, say a thing, but if that game that you happen to be playing isn't their cup of tea, they might go for more WoW, which they maybe came to Twitch to watch, for example, or they say hi or whatever, and then they jump out and then come back the next day, maybe if you're playing WoW or if you're playing another thing as well, just to hang out a little bit. But they might not have time to sit there for 20-40 minutes to engage trying to understand the game, and if it's not their cup of tea, it's lost.
I have to say that when Blizzard said build a base, it should have been Satisfactory. by the way.
I agree.
All right, they're getting me started now, Ali.
Okay, so speaking of streaming, right now the MDI is streaming on another channel. By the way, don't turn over yet. So have you been watching the MDI? Like, what do you think so far about what's happening? Are there anything that's a surprise? Do you have like any thoughts on this year's MDI or this season?
It's
Just
not.
generally.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a cool system. I think that they're definitely trying to mix it up a lot. And this time around, they're doing the cups, and there's like a lot of different, like the same kind of stream many times, kind of thing, where you just try to gather as many points for the later events, say later on, which is pretty interesting. But I feel like maybe because before, when there were fewer streams, few weeks, and there was just one bracket, it was kind of more engaging to see who stays. From my point of view, maybe, but they're bringing in some new stuff, some old stuff as well, and I really like how they ended up making you able to swap characters, because it's just more interesting to kind of see these players like destroy dungeons instead of like bringing one safe comp and everyone just brings the same.
So so compared to like when you did the casting, I guess last year, you think the format is better broken up into multiple, like basically an elongated 6-week process?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so, but I didn't actually manage to catch the Chai or the East one because it was such weird times, and I was super busy last week. But the EU or West Cup, I'm super hyped about it. It's really good teams there, and you see a lot of action and a lot of new stuff that you haven't seen honestly since the last MDI, because a lot of us aren't really into that hardcore rating mythic plusing themselves. So if you're not doing those dungeons yourself at that level, you don't see all these tips and special things going on. So it's super exciting to see.
That's also due to the nature of the MDI, where you can practice your exact comp over and over on this specific affix. Like you can only do this pull on a quaking teaming dungeon, for example. So it's not only because it's just not something you do, it's because it's MDI. And that really shows like how good the people are, like how good the players are. And it's very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Now, there's also now you're allowed to swap classes and specs, right?
Yep.
But there's not a lot of swapping happening. Why do you think that's that? Like there's almost always rogues, there's almost always warriors, and so on.
I think that a lot of times it has to simply do with dungeons are like inherently very similar. They're not too different, and you do end up having some swaps in some dungeons where there's a lot of mobs that you can pull, and you see the DK coming out, for example. And otherwise, the rogues are just really good. You kind of need Shroud on so many dungeons. Windwalkers is good in AoE in general. And like most players, most teams have a Restitute, I think, as well. So there's just some classes that are better in like 90% of the cases. And in the 10% cases they're not better, it doesn't really matter too much. So I don't know. I mean, I would say that it's a lot to do with class balance. And when you're really going min-maxing, both teams are going to know the advantages of the classes on each dungeon. So it's just going to spearhead into that some groups or some comps are just more important at a certain task, and then that's basically what you're going to do throughout the whole MDI. And then you start doing that tactic, so you go to the next dungeon and you have that mentality already, and so they're all going to kind of evolve together.
Do you think that's an issue, that there's only such a select few of specs being available? Or is that just the nature of them? Yeah.
In a perfect world, all classes would be used, right? And that's just never going to happen, because you want to have the classes have their own flavor. You want to have this class fantasy to be alive as well, and that just can't exist at the same time. I think like that kind of level of balance would be impossible.
Yeah. There's also the whole like this Shrouds, but there's also Shadow Meld. Do you think Shadow Meld is unfair? Like we see it being used in a tournament, but the most of the Mythic Plus players are still Horde. Should Blizzard do anything because of the MDI?
That's a very interesting point. Like, obviously, Alliance needs all the support they can get to get players on their side, you know. But because everyone plays. But it's very interesting. We saw a little bit of this in the previous MDIs as well, of people using the Shadow Meld to get out of combat, right? And I think it's so much more important this tier because of reaping, because you see people use that for reaping.
Yeah, we saw a similar thing, if I remember correctly.
Infested also.
Yeah, we saw a
Yeah.
similar thing in Neltharin's Lair, right? With the with the fear and the grip, and then the shadow melt from a demon hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think it's kind of like it's very niche and not super overpowered in a real life scenario where you have a pug or group that just does a dungeon and you have Shadowman. Oh, it's like, oh, that's cool. But when you look at it at a competitive level, you're gonna have those players just everyone go Shadowman if they can, and then every 2 minutes you basically have a skip.
So
And
kind of just to piggyback on that, do you think Shadow Meld hurts like class viability? So like talking to like Divine Field, for example, he's like, I can't play Paladin because they can't be Night Elf, right? So like from that perspective, do they need to make the change just to make sure that some classes are just even viable to be picked in some comps?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of when it becomes an issue for the MDI. Like I said, I don't think it's a real life scenario issue, but it becomes an issue in the MDI, and that could be done a little bit with maybe having some mobs see through visibility or it not working on them or whatever. As you say, it means that if you're not a knife, if your class cannot be Night Elf, well then you can't really play that class. So unless that class is overpowered enough to warrant bringing E anyway, then well, that's the other issue if that's the case as well. So I think it just becomes a problem when everyone's able to do it. Just like you had everyone going Blood Elf back in the day, you know, silencing, interrupting, and silencing everything.
Or even like Troll and like Raid. If you remember, like throwing like everybody switched to Troll, or even Troll on Jaina, right?
Yep.
Casual reminder.
So it becomes an issue when everyone can
Night
do
Elf
it.
Paladin in the class hall from Legion.
Oh,
Yes.
well, that was a priest who converted into Paladin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
but
then
it was still a Knight of Paladin.
Yeah, still a Night Elf Paladin.
Maybe, I mean, if anything, it could maybe open up on Tournament Realm, because that's where I feel like it's the only issue. On Tournament Realm, you might open up that the class restrictions might not be as much of a thing. But the problem with starting introducing that in the MDI is that the MDI is going to be further and further away from retail.
Yeah.
And that becomes an issue because then the competition that they are sending to us isn't comparable to what you actually play. So
Right. By just having the vendor, you can buy gear just makes it 100% uncomparable because you can 100% min-max everything.
Yeah. Well, that's more to take away like RNG. Like, could you imagine if there wasn't an RNG element to gearing up in?
I think that'd be fun to watch.
Yeah.
So we kind of touched on Prot, Prot Paladin, because Divine Field mentioned, hey, I can't be Paladin because they're not Night Elf. Like we see Prot Warrior now just dominating. We saw Blood DK for a while. What would it take, in your opinion, for like Prot Paladin to become the meta tank? Besides just nerfing Prot Warrior just straight up, would it go to Prot Paladin? Where would it go back to?
It's a pretty tough question. I think if Prot Warriors are straight up nerfed, I think Monk and then Paladin would be very, very close second. And if you want to bring up Paladins really up there, we already do fairly good DPS, obviously not Warrior DPS. But bring in some more, like we obviously have a lot of utility as well. I would love a grip, like single target grip or mass grip, be it really a really shitty version of what DKs have or whatever, but some way to move those hunters who are just standing over there and doesn't want to come join the group, you know?
Do you think
Otherwise, I feel like we have most.
Do you think grip is like Shroud, that only one? It's not fair that only one class has it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So yeah, I absolutely think so. I would love for them to make all tanks have some kind of grip. You know, you have the single target from DKs. You give monks their clash back, and it's a shitty version of a grip, but it's a way to move a character, that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to control over. And you already have Ring of Peace as well. You have some form of doing it, and that just is lacking for some of us, and makes me really sad.
Do you think that a vendor shield being capped to 3 or 4 targets is an issue for Protection Paladin? Would that be a thing? Like uncapping that in some way, would that be a way to get Protection Paladin back into the meta?
That would just really increase our DPS on, like, when you're talking about 6+ targets or 4+ targets or whatever. And like as hard as it hits now, that would be great, because that would make us really fucking strong in terms of damage. But I don't think that's the right solution. Like, I'm really happy about our damage, and I'm fine with being like a really good DPS around 3 to 5 targets, because that's kind of where you have the most real life scenarios in Mythic Plus. That's kind of what the amount of trash you pull. Even though in the MDI you always pull like way more, but I wouldn't really want to see Evader Shield just being uncapped. That would be like bringing back the old keg smash that monks had, that just like did 1 million damage, threat modifier as well, and just slam it down and just get aggro and everything.
Yeah, I was thinking something more akin to Tears Enforcer. The AoE damage from the Astro.
Now, if anything, like, I would love another kind of pickup. Like, we had Blinding Light used to do damage, that kind of thing. I think that kind of added a little bit more to us, because we're really good at picking up the 3 targets when we're running towards them. But we have a little bit of an issue on snap aggro on a lot of targets, and I wouldn't want to have every single Avenger Shield just do a crap ton of damage and hit every single target. But I would rather just maybe give us a 30-second cooldown that just does a lot of damage that we want to be using for snap aggro, a little bit of extra damage, but just another button kind of thing.
Yeah, there's an essence that does similar thing to that, and we will talk about those later.
Yeah, we'll have in the essences.
Yeah, just mentioning.
So in terms of, like, I guess the direction of M+ just generally in Battle for Azeroth compared to where it was in League, like, what are your thoughts on that? Because specifically, like, now you have trash pulls that have as many abilities as bosses. You have all of these various. They've basically definitely upped it. Dungeons take longer to do. All of those different factors. Do you think that's the right direction for Mythic Plus, or does Mythic Plus, should they have kept more of the Legion model, where trash is a little bit more de-emphasized, but bosses could be a little bit tougher, or something like that?
I think it's a good mixture of both can be healthy. I do think that when we have a situation like we have now, we definitely went too far with make sure that every trash mob is dangerous, make sure that you need to know every single one of them. That's fine if there's not as much of it. But they kept the same amount of trash as when trash was irrelevant, except for like 1 or 2 guys, and then just gave all of them threatening abilities. And this is so much to keep up with, so much to handle, and it's a very long learning curve the first few weeks. Everyone jumps into these dungeons like, I've never seen these bosses before, I've never seen this trash before. Let's see what we do, and you just end up wiping because, like, oh, I guess you have to wipe to this once or twice before you understand what they're doing. So I would love to see that complex trash, but less of it. Maybe even a little bit harder, but less of it. And then kind of more boss, and then a little bit of a trash pack, and then a mini boss kind of thing. And then that obviously gets harder during Fortified. So they're almost comparable to boss doing Fortified versus a non-tyrannical boss.
Perhaps they should take more of a, make it more like telegraphed, because you won't be able to look into the dungeon journal to see what the trash mobs do. So just maybe make those a bit more telegraphed to make sure that this one is going to hit you in front, move out of it.
Yeah, more intuitive abilities, or that you just feel like, okay, I see. Like, you have that mind wipe or whatever the in Siege Shrine, which is like that kind of frontal cone. It just spits out some stuff a few seconds after or before. It's a little bit hard to see the first time, but then you see it and it's like, oh, I realize I'm not supposed to stand in this, and you move out. And I think that's generally fine. Just having like 5 or 6 mobs that all needs to be interrupted and they all do cast different things, or like they have 3 different casts and you only need to interrupt one of them, really, that gets a lot when there's like a lot of it throughout the whole instance. And yeah, there's a long learning curve, and it's not super interesting, and it's just really frustrating when something goes wrong, for example.
Yeah. Do you want to take the next one, Lincoln?
Sure. So one change that came in BFA is that they added a seasonal affix, like the seasonal system where they rotate, one of the affixes out on a periodic basis. So like the first season was infested, this season is reaping. The next season they say will be in a quote unquote Ashara themed affix. Like, what do you kind of think about that system rotating that single affix? What do you think about the ones that they've done so far, like infested or reaping?
I think it's a really cool idea, but it is so important that the affix feels interesting to do. And look at Infested, and it was just not interesting to do. It felt like we had another layer of Sanguine on top of like bursting or something. Like you had to just deal with it, and all the time just doing a +10 just didn't feel interesting or fun. It felt like so much of a chore kind of thing. And then swap that over to Reaping, which is just such a fun affix comparatively, and it just makes you feel like you're so strong, being able to deal with all these like millions of mobs that just suddenly start running to you, and that's just a very empowering feeling dealing with them. So I think Reaping is it's so much more fun, especially coming off of Infested. And I really hope that whatever Ashara content they do or Ashara affix they do, it just needs to be fun and interesting to be kind of just speed running these dungeons, like that's important, because yeah, like that's just important for the overall enjoyment of running dungeons, in my opinion.
Was reaping well tuned? Because like what we see a lot especially in the MDI is that we see they get a reaping, they pull it on top of another trash pack, and then they pull that on top of a boss, as if like the reaping is not an issue. Is reaping even well tuned? Should it have just been? Should it be more threatening that you can't do it with anything else?
I don't know. I think you're right that sometimes it's just a little bit too easy and you don't really care. But then you go into Motherload and you get the first wave of ads, and there's just 400 of them fighting you. And then versus Atal, where you get 20% from 10 mobs, and it's like nothing. So I think if anything, it comes down to the dungeon itself, if it's really threatening or not. But I definitely do agree. They do have a little bit of a sense of underwhelmingness, if that's the word. That like, oh, we get the reaping wave, and obviously the MDI is hard to compare with because these players are really good players. They know what they're doing. They know the pull timer, the pulls. They know when they get the reaping waves, and they've obviously planned this out. When you do your own dungeon groups with your guildies and whatever, you might have a little bit more of a improvised look for it, and it's not always the same. But yeah, I do agree that it's a little bit of underwhelming, maybe. And I'm really glad that they don't have affixes. Maybe they could have done more than 3 different kind of mobs that they have. And I'm not really I don't have an issue with it being pulled with other trash, but you're not going to do that with every single one. And Shrine of Storm is always notorious with just having like so many casters.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's pretty dungeon dependent, but it is definitely not super dangerous. And like unlike Infested, you mess up with Infested and you're screwed, right? Like you have 10 of them in the next pack and they're all healing each other, and compared to here, it's like, well, you just kind of go in, and maybe even if you wiped, you go in and there's like half the reaping mobs left, and they don't really do that much. Like they just do an attack on the tank, and then there's a frontal that's really easy to dodge, and then a little bit of gray balls here and there. But
right. So one thing I mentioned, and we might get a little bit more into the summit that happened is that they mentioned that they're going to retune all the dungeon trash percentage requirements. Do you think that's too little too late, or do you think that should have happened before reaping or at the same time as reaping?
I think when it's a really good point, because when you bring up an affix that is so tied to the percentage of the mobs, I feel like that's a good point to look it over. But if reaping is going away, I don't really see why you would really look it over unless the next affix might have something to do with percentage as well. But overall, I think all dungeons can benefit from being looked over an extra time. Change some high value mobs might be giving the wrong percentage, or a little bit too much or too little, or whatever.
So based on your knowledge of the routes, they do either an MDI or more on competitive level. Like, what dungeon would you say needs the most changes? Like, for me, just personally, like, I think something like Motherlode needs some changes, because you shouldn't be able to do all the trash before the first boss.
Yeah, I would definitely say Motherlode is notorious, because you do all the trash at first boss, and then you basically skip to the second boss, and then you skip to the third boss, and then you skip to the first.
It's just a bunch of death runs, right?
Yeah, that's straight up, like that's probably the biggest issue. I think King's West have some issues as well, but that's comes down to, like, there's so little trash in that instance that there is no option. Like, you can't decide to not go that trash or do that trash, and there I feel like maybe there should be some options that might be.
So one last question I had on the MDI, at least for me, and someone actually mentioned in the chat Siege, so I just wanted to piggyback on that. So Siege is not in the map pool for the MDI, and that's because of the difference between Horde and Alliance. Do you think that's something
Right,
Blizzard
yeah.
could have tried to work out, or do you think that was just the right decision just to remove it out?
I mean, the easy way to do it right would be that everyone would just get the same dungeon, no matter if you were Horde or Alliance on the tournament realm. Everyone would get sent into the Horde version of it. But I think it also has a lot to do with people watching, and there might be Alliance, and they're seeing only the Horde scenario play out, and it's like, I don't even know what dungeon this is. It's like, I don't see this boss, even though it becomes exactly the same fight after exactly the same dungeon at the first boss. Because I think the first boss is just straight up the reskin, but the path to the first boss is slightly different. So the easy way would have just been to do it so everyone loads into the Horde version of it. But yeah, I mean, maybe they didn't have the capabilities at hand for this MDI, so that's why they just skipped it. Or it might be bad from a viewer point of view to see something that you're not familiar with, and because not everyone does have the same one, and if you're Alliance, a lot of people could be confused.
Yeah, I think that's
It could
perfectly
also
fair on the viewers too.
it could also be for the competitive scene as well, because what if someone is an alliance player and they've never done the horde version before? Now you have to do it. Wouldn't that be unfair to them as well?
No, I don't think so, because like everyone who plays at this level, they're gonna know that there's a difference. It's like, and it's just the it's just a path to the first boss, and I don't think any of them would mind if they had to do the alliance version. Like, everyone who plays in the MDI are basically Horde players on retail,
Yeah,
right?
but
So if they had to do the alliance one, I don't think anyone would really mind.
you would have to relearn the dungeon though, like at least the first part.
At least the first quarter of
the
it.
first part. Yeah, and it's like, you have several weeks on the tournament realm, and yeah, I'm sure it would be annoying, or some people would be a little bit upset about it or annoyed. But at the end of the day, like, long term, I wouldn't see any issues with it, not from their point of view.
Right, so we've been raiding for a while in the Battle of the Tsar lore. What do you think of it, and what's your favorite boss? Or what's your worst boss? Like, which boss do you dislike the most?
Overall, I would say I actually really like Battle Dazzle Dazzle lore, I guess. I always put a D in there. But I actually really like it. There's not many fights which I don't really dislike. I do think Gorong is a little bit annoying as a tank, spending a lot of time stunned and then getting tossed. But I think a lot of them had interesting tank mechanics, even though they might have been a little bit far from each other. Like, Opulence is pretty interesting, but you end up tanking for like 30 seconds, and then you do nothing for 30 seconds, and then maybe you tank for 30 seconds again. So it's like maybe a little bit low on how much you have to do in that fight, for example. But most of them are pretty interesting.
So this tier, and I think you mentioned, I think you kind of alluded to this, is that they have at least 3 bosses. So Opulence, Rastakhan, and Blockade, where you have to kind of separate the raid and kind of like coordinate a little bit between 2 completely separate groups. Is that then they haven't done a lot of encounters like that in a while? Should they do more encounters like that?
Well, you have a left group and a right group.
Yeah, or you have like a live side and a dead side, or like I think Desolate Host is the last one I remember where the raid was divided up that much.
Yeah, I don't know. It's always interesting. I do think those fights do have some, like, they definitely have a place in WoW. We've had a lot of them. We've had like, where you split the group. It is frustrating from a progression point of view when you are in one side that's not messing up. Maybe you don't have hard mechanics yet, and the other side does. You have the same on, what was Blockade you mentioned, right? Well, you have a left side and a right side. It's always frustrating when one side wipes and there's nothing you can do about that. You don't even see what's going on there, and you can't even help them out, give them advice or anything, because you're not seeing what's going on there, and they're obviously dealing with other mechanics. That to me is really frustrating. But I do like having these specialized tasks where you have maybe not half the group, but like 5 people go off and they do their mini thing for a bit, and then they come back, like Aonar kind of thing. Not Aonar is not a great example of a boss, but I like that part of the fight, that you have a task group that they do their thing and then they come back and then maybe they do it again, or you have send another group. I actually like those parts about the fights personally, but it is really frustrating when they may be doing they're doing a completely different fight than you at that time, and it gets frustrating when
Okay. So the guild you're in now is top 10 world. So you're definitely in there attempting these bosses before a lot of other people. So like, how do you like prepare for something like that, knowing that you're going to be one of the first people that attempts, Mythic Jane or attempts a Mythic end boss? Especially something that nobody's seen before or hasn't seen before that much.
Well, there's 2 ways of looking at it, and one of them is basically you kind of you kind of think about the fights, and we've done PTR testing, so we do the fights on PTR, figure out what.
Do you PTR test everything?
Yes, I think we're a little bit so on making sure that people show up for the heroic tests, because they're not always that important. But mythic tests, we always make sure that, unless it's like a big holiday or we have half the group out or something for whatever reason, then yeah, we make it a point to always make sure that we PTR test.
So one thing that's changed definitely in the last year or so is definitely the streaming angle. Like now that Method, now they streamed Waldir, they streamed Battle of the Lore. I assume they're going to be streaming Crucible next week. They're going to be streaming Shara's Palace probably. Like, how has that changed, like, your preparation? Do you actually watch the stream, like, the first week? Or do you kind of just, like, block it out and just get ready to just make sure that your guild can kill it?
Yeah, so when I was starting the sentence I did before, there was one way, and the second way is you just watch Method do it. Straight up. At least now. That's just the easiest way to do it right now, right? Obviously, if you're rating at that level, Methods, obviously, they're going to get top 3, even if, like, limit kill set before EU servers come up, for example. Like, Methods obviously going to be top guild. We're not striving to be those guilds. We don't have 16 alts planned or whatever, or prepared and everything. And we know we're going to be behind them because we're not day rating. We are only rating on evenings. So they're going to be ahead from day 1. So when we get there, we're going to start rating. Obviously, the first few bosses are usually pretty easy, so we kind of have them figured out. And we watch Method or some US guild, Big Dumb Guild is streaming, Wildcard Gamer was streaming this year as well. It's like you can see those guilds do it. And honestly, like, we had most of the fights lined up, but then, for example, Jadefire, I think, is a very simple, very good option, very good example. For example, like, obviously not a super hard fight, but we saw from the US guilds that if you just nuke and destroy the monk first, like, the fights is so much easier. And then we just did that and killed it in the first pull, or I think we wiped once, I don't remember, but that just gives you, like, direction. You know how you're going to do the fight, you know the mechanics and how to deal with them. But being able to watch another guild actually do the fight or how they prepared gives you the extra direction that can just make you do it a little bit smoother. Same with Opulence, with Prot Paladins. You had Rastakhan as well. You have a Prot Paladin solo solo tanking one. It's not super hard stuff, but you might not figure it out and by yourself. And I think Rastakhan, the big thing was the pattern you put the Death Doors, for example, and you get that and you see that. And a lot of times, Method might not have the best strat, but when we get to that fight, even though it's just literally hours or a day behind, we know they've killed it. We know what will work, so we can just focus on working through with their strat, or obviously another guild that streamed it and do their strat. And maybe we have a better setup for it. Maybe we have a worse setup and just adapt.
So you're known mostly for playing Paladin. A lot of these bosses are playing, that's generally probably your preferred tank. But you have been known to play other tanks as required. Like, how long does it take you to decide, I need to play Warrior on this boss, or I need to play Death Knight on this boss? 'Cause I think you played like Death Knight on Blockade. Like, how did you know, like, okay, I need to know? Was it like right away? Or was it like the strategy going in? Or did you pull it on Paladin first before you made the switch over? Like, kind of talk through that process.
It depends a little bit on the fight, straight up. This time, if we're looking at BOD, straight up from Mechatork, I played DK and Mechatork as well. Obviously, we saw other guilds do 2 double DK, and they made no sense running a Paladin there when you could run 2 DKs. Honestly, like, DKs were fine in surviving it, so it hurts, but they were fine at surviving it. So having that extra DK for that extra grip really does help out, and I don't think we really ever had tank deaths on that fight in the first place, but when we started that Proteus, I instantly went DK because we knew we would need control over that fight. And then when we got to Blockade, we had seen a few guilds kill it, Method obviously, but I think we went with Pieces strat where they had a DK solo soaking the Ires. And well, if the DK did that their group, then why reinvent the wheel? Paladins could do it well, and but they're not as strong as DKs. DKs have that raw health, and it's just a really, really big health pool hit. They have that raw health pool, and I even use like a little bit of defensive trinkets that were old because the new ones doesn't work anyway. But the one Sunday's bargain trinket doesn't work against the IR for some reason.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, for some reason it just goes through.
That's good to know.
Which one? Sorry.
Sunday's bargain.
One Sunday's bargain.
Oh.
I just goes directly through it for some reason. I think it has to do with how, because on Mythic it knocks you back, and if you're in an immunity, you still get knocked back. So I think, but you don't take the damage. So I think it has something to do with that mechanic that it goes through.
So you would say in this case, you just looked at what Pieces did and said, okay, Pieces did it, I'm just going to play Blood DK?
Yeah.
So before streaming, was there ever a time where you had to pull the boss on another tank and then switch?
Yes, absolutely. That happened, let's see. I think, well, one of the most significant best examples for that was Emerald Nightmare scenarios, where I played my Paladin, and then turned out Warrior's obviously just really good. You had Ignore Pain, that was really strong at that point, and you had Inspiring Presence. So eventually I just swapped to the Warrior because we kind of knew it was better in the first place, but a lot of times you're not pulling, and the first 10, 20 pulls of a hard boss, you're not going to kill it, right? So you're going to look for things, find things out, what strat do you want to do? And a lot of times this means that while a Warrior might be a lot better at like maybe AoE tanking ads if you're not killing them, some guilds obviously went through the strat where you actually do kill the ads. So you kind of have to figure out what strat your guild want to go with. Once you know that, you can figure out what tank is going to be best for what I'm going to be doing right here. And Stormwall is a good example right there as well, because we knew we were going to solo soak the Ires, and DKs are just really good at that. Not only do they have the knockback resistant with Death's Advance, but they can solo soak, and they have a lot of externals or abilities.
Yeah, you can like take Ruin Tap.
Yeah, Ruin Tap, and then you just rotate others' cooldowns and stuff like that, and you can just do most of it.
So this raid was pretty unique in a lot of ways. So one uniqueness is the fact for part of the raid you switch to the other faction. So like if you're Horde, you'll play part of it as Alliance. And if you're Alliance, you'll play the end of it as Horde. What did you think of that? Did you think they did that was that well implemented? or well designed, well thought out. Like that's the first time they've ever done something like that. So like, what are your thoughts?
I think it was cool from a storytelling perspective. But from a raider, I just kind of thought it's just annoying that my where I have my racial ability, that one just disappears, and suddenly another ability just gets flung into my bars wherever there's spot.
Right.
And I get to use it half the time. Like I get Gift on Naru because I'm a Tauren, so I get transferred onto Draenei, and I think I use Gift on Naru like once every reset. Like because I always forget it's there because in my mind I don't remember that I'm a Draenei, and I'm not going to look down at my bars all the time. It's like, oh right, I have that ability ready. Let's use it. So and not that it's a very strong ability either.
So that kind of leads me to my next kind of little follow-up question: is that should they have done more with that? So like, what if they had a stun on like Conclave that you can only remove with like every human for himself, right, or every man for himself? Would that have been better if they kind of like added mechanics around the racials, knowing that we're going to have alliance only on this boss or only horde on those bosses?
That's a pretty cool idea, actually. I haven't thought about that, but I do like the idea. There might be a problem with because you can't choose what you get turned into.
You probably would have to add some way to choose. Because like for me, like I was a Draenei. Like I do not want to spend any like second as a Tauren at all. So like for me, I'd rather be like Blood Elf or Zandalari. So like for me, like definitely would prefer to have like a choose mechanic, right? Like, have like an NPC that says, yeah, I would like to be experience this as whatever, right?
Yeah, so you could have something like either it spawns a lot of ads and you want to use Light Force Draenei on that, or you have something that heal and you want to use Gift of the Naru.
Right.
They could be like...
Yeah, it would be cool if you could choose as well, but then when you get back to the point where you are your own faction, are you going to expect people to race change for a boss? Because then you would technically be stronger on a fight where you are turned into the other faction, because you can choose and tailor your faction or your faction racials.
Yeah, that is a good
versus
point.
What
that's
the way
good
it
point.
was now.
But you're also
the way it is now is obviously that you can tailor your characters to the Horde characters, because if you're Horde, right, because you're gonna stay those. And Alliance had to tailor themselves like basically in a mirror or however you want to call it, so you can transfer over to those. So you're good for one boss, but not everything else. I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And in a lot of cases, it is class limited. So like, if your class can't be a certain race, so like you just know that like sometimes it just wouldn't work out, right? That's a really good point. So just quickly, just moving on here into more Zara lore stuff that we have. We have so many questions to ask. So we had Blueprint on here, a couple weeks ago at our last stream, and he was talking about how Jaina in Phase 3 was a really disappointing boss. Like the mechanics didn't work, and when they hotfixed it, blah blah blah. I'm sure you heard all the stories. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Did they drop the ball on Jaina? Did they drop the ball on the tuning in this raid overall? Like, is it just too easy?
I think the middle pack in the raid was absolutely too easy. Opulence, Conclave, Rastakhan, those bosses are not bosses that should die in like 4 to 10 pulls. Especially not Rastakhan. Rastakhan's supposed to be like the badass leader of the Horde, right? Or the Zandalar, right? And he's just basically dead so fast, right? So that one I feel definitely he's the biggest miss of all.
So he should be more like Jaina feel, but not like Jaina difficulty.
Yeah, I think so. And I do think that the way people ended up doing the Death Realm with the doors stacked on top of each other to avoid everything, I feel like that had a big hand to play in why it was so easy. But even take that away, and you would still not have a super, super hard boss.
Well, even like the trivialization of Phase 2, right? Because like somebody never has to move around.
Yeah.
There's no tank switch. That
being
also
able to solo tank that.
Yeah, being able to solo tank that on a Paladin is really like basically trivializes the fight in a lot of ways, or at least that part of the fight.
It helps a lot to remove unknown elements from the fight. And during progression, you really want to keep all these unknowns to an absolute minimum, right? Because those are what's going to end up wiping you. So if you as a Paladin can have a little bit of harder fight, just doing this by yourself, that you can just train yourself doing over like 3-4 pulls and then you get it, while the rest of the group just basically has one less mechanic they don't need to deal with at all, they don't have to think about, then they're gonna do their job a lot better. So if you can do this with the 3 or 4 elements of the fight, you have a much easier fight to deal with.
So then what about like Blueprint's thoughts on Jaina specifically in like phase 3? Did they drop the ball there?
Yeah, I think so. I think I said this when I saw a method just go all in for the kill. I was like, I just really hope that Blizzard went all the way to on Mythic, instead of killing her at 5%, you kill her at 0, because that would kind of destroy that progress for a while at least. I think they might still eventually have done it, but they would have required another reset, at least the way they were progressing.
Were you surprised
But-
there was no secret phase?
Yes, actually, I kind of was, because we haven't had secret phases for a while, and
Gul'dan, I
in
think,
the
is
past,
the
it
last real one.
Yeah, they kind of rotated it, so we have a mythic phase, and then not a mythic phase, and then a mythic phase kind of thing, and we obviously didn't have one for Gahun, so I was really excited about seeing a mythic phase for Jaina, and if that started at 5%, I wouldn't even mind if you could cheese phase 3 with just DPSing DPSing Jaina. And yeah, absolutely, like they missed the tuning there. I don't think they ever thought that any guild would be like, oh, we'll just skip doing everything and just single target the boss and hope that works. But there was just so much tuning issues, I think, on the damage of the chill as well, that it wasn't really feasible doing the strat the way they probably intended, and then killing the ad spawned smaller ads that you all had to deal with, that would then, I don't know if the small spawned ads again or whatever, but like it was just super messy in a stage at the fight which there's just nothing but chaos. Like even with that limited amount of abilities right now, you still have Icefall just coming from like two edges at the same time, and they're completely random where they spawn, and that just hard to deal with. With a boss, you can barely move because she stands there and just ponders for 10 seconds doing nothing.
Someone mentioned it in the chat, so I'll just bring it up here. Like, what about Blockade? Like, what did you think about that boss? Was it too easy?
Well, I think the fight was actually fine. The problem was that you could just let the ads just cast, and they did nothing. They don't at the start, if you don't know, when they hit 50%, they're supposed to teleport over to the side. But what ended up happening was that when they were channeling and empowering the boss, they wouldn't do any such thing. So you ended up getting them to like 55%. They start to cast, and then you nuke them from 55% to dead before the boss gets 100 energy. And that just removed all the elements from the first phase. Instead of doing the first phase for like 2.5 minutes, you do the first phase for, I don't know, 50 seconds or something, and then that part starts, and you're done with that phase. And that trivializes a big part of the encounter, which has a lot of RNG elements, where people has an easy time to just end up dying and forcing you to restart the fight. So yeah, I definitely think that was kind of an issue as well, that they just missed that. Otherwise, phase 2 I think is generally fine. There's a lot going on, and you need a lot of DPS everywhere, and to be able to kill that the first few weeks, you basically brought you brought 2 melee or 3, and everyone else was range, because you had to deal with ads and then other ads and then other ads, so.
Yeah, like I think we were like, our only melee is like one rogue, one demon hunter when we're pulling it.
Yeah. But I think otherwise, like, yeah, if they were teleporting like they are now, or they were still doing mechanics when they were channeling their main cast on the boss, then I think the fight would have been really good, like in terms of difficulty-wise on the curve as well. But I think the middle of the pack inside the raid, I think Rastakhan should honestly just have been the second hardest boss in the instance. I would have been perfectly fine with that, because that was technically the end boss for Alliance. And then they obviously end up seeing what Horde did meanwhile, and then you obviously face the real end boss, which is supposed to be the hardest encounter in the raid. So
Wouldn't that be very confusing in terms of raid progression? Because you would do the first 6 bosses, then you would do the second hardest, and then you would do 2 free bosses. Sorry, 5 first bosses. You would do the 6th boss, who is the second hardest. If you couldn't kill the second hardest boss, you're locked out of 2 bosses worth of loot. You wouldn't be getting Mechatorque, you wouldn't be getting blockades. even though
Yeah.
they are easier.
It wouldn't have been ideal either.
So maybe they could have done
but
it like you skip and you do Rastakhan and then Jaina.
yeah, I mean I think that would have been better. I would have liked to see Rastakhan later on in the raid, but I just feel like he's such an imposing figure, and he should have just been more than just a kill. And a lot of times in raids, there are these loot pinata bosses. When you kill one boss, that's hard, and then the next boss after that, it's a lot easier, and you just basically get free loot. It's a little bit problematic when you have two bosses after that, and then you have the end boss. Absolutely. So it wouldn't have been a good idea to have Rastakan be like the second hardest boss, maybe, but there was such a big increase. Like you have all the first few bosses on Jaina just being like 10 times harder than the second hardest boss. So tuning's a little bit all over the place, and I feel like Jaina was probably stealth buffed after they had tested and practiced, and because they always do a lot of internal testing on the bosses, and then they just see all the guilds just blasting through the whole raid, right? And then before they get to Jaina, they're like, maybe Jaina needs more HP. Maybe the abilities on Jaina needs to do a bit more damage, and then just like added like a zero on all numbers, and then basically like, let's hope they can kill this.
Adding a zero to her health would be interesting.
Yeah, a little bit too much, maybe.
So in the pre-stream prep, we were talking about faction swapping, and you asked if that was method or the raid, right?
Yeah.
Or well, limit. We're actually going to ask about limit anyways. So what's your opinion on this? Like, is this like method? If you don't know, method crafted a bunch of gear, spent several hundreds, not several hundreds, like 50 million gold, I think.
Like 70.
70. Okay.
Method spent 100 million gold, I think.
Oh, did they actually spend 100? Okay.
They were 100 million in debt after the raid was over.
Right. So if you're not aware of how they did it, they essentially crafted a bunch of gear so that they could trade with personal loot. And limit faction changed to get free 400 items from an alliance only quest that was meant to balance out.
War mode.
Thank you. What's your opinion on this? Like, are people going too far with progress now? Like, are they abusing too many systems at once?
Well, there's always been a lot, and if it wasn't this, like in the past, it was running. I don't know what was Exorcist doing TOS. Like they were running like 12 like split runs, and someone's always going to take it to the next level. So sometimes it's a little bit on Blizzard's plate to make sure that they can't do that. And I think from their point of view, they thought that personal loot was going to be that, but they kind of missed the ball completely on this tier because they made so many craftable items that were the same item level as what you get from the raid. So basically, have all characters that you do not care about. Every single one of them crafts the two blacksmithing one if you're a plate one, and then you craft the ring, you craft the helm, you craft the trinket, right? And then suddenly you have more than half of all your pieces of gear that can drop. You can now trade when you're inside the instance. So the people that are your mains, they can then get the best in slot itemized pieces, with the sockets, with the tertiary stat maybe, or the perfect secondary stats. And the trinket is especially important as well to be able to trade, and not to mention the Asart helm, right? So if they would have just increased the requirement on Breath of Bonsamdi, because you need to kill two bosses on heroic to be able to craft a 400 piece. But once you had done that, you crafted that one, disenchanted it, scrapped it, then craft the other one, and then scrap that one, craft that one. So you craft all 5 or 6 pieces from just killing 2 bosses on heroic. And then after that, you can trade everything. If they would have increased that to like not being able to use that the first week, or have it be 100 essences, then suddenly no one would be able to do that for the first week, and then nobody would bother doing that for the second week when heroic was out.
Yeah, I think that was like kind of a big miss on their part because when you disenchanted before this raid, like let's say you disenchanted or scrapped like the Uldir crafted gear, like from the Sanguicell, you didn't get the Sanguicell back, is what I remember. So like that change alone is what enabled this change, right? Or enabled them to be able to do this.
I think I got the Sanguisel. I think I got it back. I don't remember.
Yeah, I
I
think
never. I
it
didn't
was
Yeah,
actually craft.
I don't. Maybe it wasn't the Expulsum. Maybe you didn't get the Expulsum. I know there was some materials you didn't get back.
Yeah, but the problem was this, like, it was the same exactly. We talked about that as well, right? When Warlords of Draenor came out, they made so many craftable items that you could not only craft and equip, and then to obviously make up for where you had low item levels otherwise. So you could craft them and then upgrade them as well back then. And when they make crafting gear available day one of progress with jumping in for Mythic, you're obviously going to invite all the top teams to not only have this as a requirement, but everyone's going to go above and beyond to try to do this. And personal loot, I think that was his Blizzard's secret weapon to stopping alt split runs, and they just didn't work out because now it's like so much more important that your alts are good geared, so that your mains can get good gear.
And it's the same thing with like Residuum, right? Like all of them, like they're running like like I think Method Josh, and all of them are running like 30 and 40 heroic Uldir clears, and they would just literally feed all the Residuum and all the Azerite to a single character, and they would get all of that on a single character. So like they would give it all to Gingy or whatever.
And I think this is also a problem with like all this would have been sorted if they put the Residuum vendor out 3 weeks after progress. Like, because then obviously top guilds wouldn't be able to do that, like farm the Residuum that crazy, or and they wouldn't have really. They would be done with progress. If you're only looking at the top raiders, who are really the only people who are really exploiting this to the limit, then they wouldn't be able to do it. They wouldn't benefit from doing so. So they wouldn't be as widespread to try to do it. We'd still have people who are like begging people to trade you an Asteroid piece because they want the Residuum, because they want to be prepped for the next raid kind of thing. But
Do you need?
do you need?
Do you need that?
Please no.
I think Residuum is generally kind of fails. Like they kind of failed with that completely, and in general, I think though, but it was built from Waking Essences, which worked so well in Legion when they implemented Waking Essences. But
It's almost like introducing something that has a tradable option is bad.
Yeah,
or like not bad, but like dangerous.
Yeah, and there were so many very easy, simple solutions for this as well. First of all, like they made it so that Azerite, when you trade it, you can disenchant it and you get the rest of them. But then they made it. Oh no, wait! Actually, if someone trades, you can only get it if it's your armor type.
Right.
But they should have just gone further. That if you trade this item, if you're not the original owner of this item, you will not get rest of them. Only the person who actually got this item can get rest of them, because he got the losing ticket, right? He won, but he didn't get anything useful, so now he can disenchant. You could technically do this for all items, If you get an item that's not an upgrade for you, maybe you can disenchant it and get Resident. But if you trade it, that person will not get Resident. That person will only get it as an upgrade, because he wants it to be so his character can be more powerful.
You can go even further beyond to encourage that behavior by giving you the Resident if you trade the item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would probably be very, very hard to code, because
but
if you trade it, then they trade it back, trade it to someone else, and then trade it back to you, and it's like, oh look, yeah, I got Resident. But I know what you mean. But yeah, that's cool. Like that's an interesting idea, but it just sucks. Like it would fix the problem as well with personal loot, because it really, really sucks now getting a piece of loot that you might even need, but obviously the guild wants you to trade it to someone else. So a few weeks into progress or into farm, you don't have personal loot anymore. You have master loot. So personal loot is only really relevant when it comes to the very first weeks of progress. And then after that, it's technically master loot, unless something like Titan Forge procs to all the way up to 425. Then sure, you get to keep it. But
yeah, I were about to get the Gronk trinket, but Titan Forge is 425. It's Warforged to 425, so I couldn't use it. That was fun.
So we just Sorry, go ahead, Trekkie.
Or you have a 515 Kimball trinket, and then the next one you get is 420, and it's like, well, I can't trade it because that's my highest trinket. So now you get a 5 item level upgrade, and you can't trade it to another guy who still is lacking his Kimball Trinket, for example.
And then you
Yeah.
get a 415 socketed, and it's an upgrade.
Like, yeah.
At
So
that
we
point,
just-
you have to trade it though.
Yeah, so we just have a couple more questions on the raid. Wally, did you want to ask this one about tank balance?
Yeah, so you have in raids, you have one class standing out, monks, but there's also other classes like paladins, DKs, warriors, who are also really close. What's your personal tank rating? Where do you think each tank shines in the context of the raid?
Well, in the context of this raid, obviously, I think monks are just by far the best in person survivability. I think warriors are very close up there as well, a lot more so than I originally thought. But like when it comes to straight up personal survivability, there's very little that can beat a monk, right? And then warriors come very close there now that you can block any ability, and you have ignore pain off global cooldown. Past that, you definitely have DKs having a lot of issues with some fights, especially a fight like Jaina, where you have to be in melee all the time to be useful. And Jaina is just not a fight that moves. She doesn't move towards you. Not to mention that you require them. Like you don't have a range ability like Paladins now have with Shield Righteous. You can use that no matter if you're melee or range, but they need to be melee both to get their stacks up as well as getting a self heal.
Right,
So
and
that's really rough.
And right, that grip is not like a required mechanic on that boss. So like even they don't even bring anything.
But then again, like where the grip is useful, we saw that in last tier as well. Although DKs were really good at that time as well. But when grip is useful, it's almost too useful. So you need a fight where grip is useful, but that fight is really hard to deal with as a DK. Then it would be an interesting option, right? Because then you would have to do a hard fight, but you are very useful. But Mechatorp is not a very hard fight for tanks.
Yeah.
You swap a lot, you swap often, and DKs have pretty good tools as well against that. So it's a no-brainer kind of to go with a DK, right? And same with the what was the fight? Mithrax. A DK tank just being able to single target. Yeah, if you're looking at other tiers, because we have that single, but that grip is useful.
Or even like Agromar. Going back to like Agromar or going back to these other bosses.
Yep. Absolutely trivial.
Kill Jaden during the trend, like the second transition.
It's so useful. Like it's either too good or it's not interesting at all. Like either you need it or it's whatever. I ended up obviously running a DK on Blockade as well, personally for its solo soaking capabilities, but also because they have a 90% slow. And you want to slow the ads that cannot be rooted or pushed back, so you want to slow them. And you have a 90% slow. That is so insane. Having two DK tanks, you can't chain them, and that slow goes to 90 and then 80 and then 70, and then after that it's less than what a Frost Mage bring.
Right.
But the moment you pop that Death and Decay down, the ad is standing still. That gives you so many seconds.
We have Consecrated Ground, though. You think we'll be broke?
50%. I mean, it's good though. It is really good. If we don't have a Frost Mage, for example, running around, then a Paladin is actually kind of nice. Like, because when you're running around solo soaking anyway, you can just pop that down, and it's a 50% slow.
Yeah,
that's a huge area.
So, kind of just wrap up the tier one or this this block of questions. One thing we didn't see in Uldir, and one thing we haven't seen in this raid, are raid skips. So being able to say, hey, kill Mechatorp 4 times or kill Rastakhan a bunch of times, just skip ahead. Like, do you have any insight into why they chose not to do that? Like, what are your thoughts? Should they go back and retroactively add skips for future, farming or other things like that? Or how do you think they should handle it in the future?
I think I wish they had, I wish they brought it back because it makes re-clearing a little bit more easier. Whatever, you can kind of skip some bosses you might not care too much about because they might not drop good loot, or you're only interested in a last boss. I think the problem from Blizzard, or the reason why Blizzard doesn't really want to do it, is it promotes raiding to not do the raid. Like your end goal is to not raid. And it should be that you want to kill all the bosses because everything can Warforge and Titan Forge. And just going in there because the last boss has a good loot or the last boss has a mount, then like I feel like the mount should be a reward for doing the whole thing, maybe, and not just going in there killing 2 bosses or 3 bosses, whatever, and then you're done. And from a storytelling point of view in BOD, I don't think it really would have worked because then you jump in there, you jump in and just do the Mecha Torque. You only do the Horde version of the instance, basically.
So it's a good question on the mount and like the mount farm, especially that we saw in Nighthold and in Taurus. So if they switch to a system where it's more like the vicious mount, where you fill up a bar based on like the number of bosses you kill, and then you get the mount, would that be better than just having the RNG we have now, like personal loot RNG?
It's an interesting point of view. Basically,
that
like
would kill boosting. That would absolutely kill the boosting.
It would kill boosting. But it would do like, imagine if you could buy the mount, say for 5,000 Breath of Bonsandi.
Right.
It's an interesting idea. Maybe they could do. I really wish. I feel like they've so missed the ball on that too. Like both Breath of Bonsandi and Sanguisa. Like, why are they there? Like they matter the first 2 weeks, and then you just stack them up in your bags, and they're kind of so useful.
Feasts, Trekkie, feasts.
What they could do is use them sort of like Blood of Sagaris. Give you a little bit of a pot, like give them a themed pot, like Cahoon. Those give you Potion of Bursting Blood and the other damage one, right? The one for the casters. Just make them themed pots.
Yeah, the easy way would be that, like, just add a Blood of Sageras vendor basically, and you could get. And yeah, I don't think getting like everything like the Blood of Sageras vendor is a good idea, because then like all the crafting materials. But like you said, like you could trade 1 or 10 for a pot. You get you raid a little bit, so you get some raiding materials. That could be interesting. Or you could just straight up be able to buy toys, pets, mounts. Give you some long-term reward that's not RNG and that you have to work your way up to. I think that's a cool idea. I just feel like they're so useless and they're just taking up backspace. And don't you need like enchanting to turn it into a Sanguisel in the first place?
No, some of them. So like I have blacksmithing. I can do that through blacksmithing.
All right, cool.
Yeah, it would kind of like, just thinking about it, I guess, taking it to the next level, is that it would kind of be like Conquest, that you get. It's like basically a participation reward for just doing the content.
Well, the problem then I feel like you would have to scale it up so that the harder bosses would give you more, so it would go fast. And then it comes down to a big problem. It's like, oh well, Blizzard tuned that this boss gives you too much or whatever. But I think that would be a good idea if you have skips, because then you would incentivize people to do it. But then would guilds choose to do what's just time efficient for them, and just go kill 2 bosses, get out of the way, but people really want to kill other bosses for the extra reward? I don't know. I think it just makes more sense. Puts those skips in where the end bosses doesn't give you anything really specific, because then you can skip it in case for less progress guilds, basically, they can skip to those end bosses and get to the last boss that they may be progressing on faster. You killed Mecha Torque 4 times, right? You can get to Mecha Torque the next week instead of having to extend. And then you can go back and kill. You get to Jaina, right? And then you have issues of one raid day, one of your healers doesn't show up. So, well, at least we didn't extend, so we can go back and kill the first few bosses because we just jumped over those and get some gear and then tackle Jaina.
There's also the argument of going back for certain items. Like say we are progressing on a Shara raid, and our Unholy DK doesn't have a trinket. We can skip to Mechatork and kill that. It doesn't have to be only the cosmetic rewards. You could still be like, we need this one specific boss. It's just after the skip.
Yeah, the problem with that, I think, is that Blizzard kind of just for a long time now, Blizzard just wants you to ignore the old raid. Like, you should just be interested in doing the new raid. They don't really want you to go back in the old raids and like really like farm stuff. But I definitely see your point. Like, if there's a really good item, you know, that you didn't manage to get through progress of one tier, you can go into next tier and then kill an old boss. Same with maybe the Mithrax trinket. You could kind of look at that as well.
Convergence.
Yeah, that too. You know, it's like
The one that happens to be just at a skip.
But if that's the case, if anything, Blizzard would just rather want to nerf that trinket, and so
That's
that it's
what they
not a
did.
requirement to go back to an old raid. You know, like they really don't want that. They never want that to be the case, where an old that you are actively raiding old content to get best in stock gear. That is never going to be the case again. And if that happens to be the case, then Blizzard will hopefully take action and nerf it or buff the current trinkets, for example, so that they're worth.
Yeah, do you remember when they nerfed when they nerfed the trinket by adding more strength to it, so it's better for warriors? The
Which trick was that?
COF, the one from Nightfall.
Oh,
I think they nerfed the effect a bunch.
Yeah, they
and
nerfed the
just added
effect
more
and
strength.
buffed the strength to like make it a not bad trinket at die level.
yeah.
But it turned out to be just better for warriors.
Casual reminder that how good it was for warriors was the same as Ret Paladins before they nerfed it, but they nerfed Ret Paladins after less than 24 hours, by the way. Still salty.
70%, by the way.
70%, by the way.
So speaking of raids, there's a new raid coming out soon, Crucible of Storms. Have you tested the raid on PTR? Like, what do you think about either boss? Do you have any initial impressions, like going into progress?
We did a PTR testing on both, and although I think only the Unat, the last boss, was only tested once, it's pretty interesting. It's a short tier, which means that they can do very complicated bosses, kind of thing, and that's noticeable from the very first boss. It's like a ton of mechanics, a ton of different things happening at the same time, kind of thing, and you need to like organize. So I'm super excited about it. The only thing I guess you could say is that it's obviously not a new tier. You go in, and even the piece of loot isn't really that amazing. It's not like 1 week you're gonna be 415 item level, right? The first week, and then the second week you're gonna suddenly be 425. So the increase between each week is so much less because there's obviously only 2 bosses as well, not 9 that you can kill for gear.
Right.
So it's
So each
essentially
week is
Trials of
basically
Valor.
gonna be the same.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
essentially
yeah, it's
Trial of Valor. Do you
It
expect
is
the
Trials of Valor.
same? Do you expect the same difficulty jump
As
between
in Hellion?
what was like Hellion level difficulty for the second boss?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think the first one, I think Guild's like method or whatever, you kill the first boss in 10, 15, maybe 20 pulls, and then the last boss is going to be 100, 150.
Does the fact that there's only been 1 or 2 tests concern you? You said there was a lot of mechanics. Is there anything that worries you? Like with bugs or with just bad timing?
I'm not that worried about bugs or bad timing, really. If anything, I'm worried about the Jaina thing happening again, where they undervalue or underestimate what a guild could do. And when they set their mind, like thinking outside the box. A lot of times, these players who have tested the raids, they've been testing it basically either knowing how the designer intended it to be killed, or they've done one strat and then figured it's like, oh, well, I can't see anything. I can't see any way where someone would think to kill this another way, just like Jaina, for example. And that's what I'm mostly worried about. They do have a lot of people testing and looking for bugs and that kind of stuff, but
Did they test
That might
either of
still
these
happen.
bosses on Mythic?
first boss was tested on Mythic, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Second boss was not, because obviously, like Jaina,
Obviously
kind of
not.
difficulties.
Yeah.
No.
Do you have any predictions? So I think you mentioned it. Are you sticking with like the first boss will die relatively quickly, second boss is 150 pulls, 200 pulls? Is that your guess?
I think the second boss would be less than 150 pulls. They did say in the blog post or whatever that it's going to be Jaina difficulty, but everyone already being geared up is going to eliminate a lot of wipes, and it's only 2 bosses, so I think everyone also, because it's in the same tier, everyone has all their alts for 15 as well. So if they want to swap in a character, it's already geared. Unlike you need an extra, or you need a someone to go on their alt for Jaina progress because you need 2 disc priests, well, that alt's not going to be 415 as your main. It might be 408, but that's obviously a severe disadvantage.
Right.
And that's not going to be the case in this half tier kind of thing. So I think it's just going to be a lot easier, and everyone's already prepped. Everyone knows what's going on, and just like jump in there. There's no differences in classes or anything like that. So.
And then you mentioned the itemization. Like, what do you think about the itemization just generally? Should Blizzard do more items like this? Because it just seems like a lot of gear is just just regular secondary stat itemization, but no real procs or anything. But it seems like in this raid they're doing something a little bit different. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It's pretty interesting. They're kind of putting like a small trinket effect or something on all pieces, and then giving them a little bit less secondary stat, and in some cases no primary stat at all. I think it's very interesting. I think it's interesting to have a tier where everything that drops is like that. And for Prot Paladins, for example, straight up, we only have 4 pieces from the whole raid. So we're not going to replace every single piece of our gear with something that has some shiny proc or use effect or whatever, you know. So we're going to get max 4 pieces if you even want all 4. I think it's cool. Well, I think, if anything, it's a good test to see if that's something that we want to bring in the future. Imagine this, because obviously these days we don't have tier sets. We don't have 2-piece, 4-piece. Imagine if you had 1 or 2 pieces of gear that had an effect or something like a tier piece, or like half kind of thing one. I think it's a cool test, and I'm expecting that we might see more of it later on if it's.
Yeah, we have them up on the stream right now. I don't know if you can see them. We just want to know like what your first opinions on them are, like first impressions of them are. Yeah. So we have the Abyssal Speaker's Gauntlets, which are gloves, and they give you crit. And they have an effect that gives you a shield whenever you attack, about a 2-minute proc thing, and it gives you about a 10k shield. What's your opinion on that? It also gives you haste whenever it's up.
I think the actual value of that one is a lot higher inside the if you're looking at the with your actual stats, because obviously in the tooltip it says 10k. In real world or whatever it is right now in the game files in WoW, it's closer to like 30-40k.
Yeah, this is also 390. It will drop for 10, I believe, right?
On heroic.
That's right.
405. 405.
Really? That's it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 5 item levels higher than the same difficulty.
It's +5 on the first boss, +10 on the second boss.
Yeah.
So 420 at Mythic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it gives a sizable shield. What's your opinion on that?
I think it's a cool thing. I don't really like the fact that I would have loved to see this without the sacrifice of a secondary stat, just because they are so special. Maybe it could be something that there was less of them, but there's always so many. So if you could have all of them be really powerful, and you would have 4 or 6 of them in your whole arsenal, that would be really powerful.
Yeah, so you would go back and farm for Titanforged.
Yeah, and this is going to be the only real power increase we're going to see compared to people who are decked out in best in stock here in Battle of Dasalador.
Yeah.
Looking at this one, I like it. 2 procs per minute, as you said, right? And then the only thing I don't like is... Yeah, right. The only thing I don't like about it is the haste you get while the shield is there, because for a tank, that's just going to go away. And I would maybe have liked to see it be like, oh, when the bubble bursts, you get the haste or whatever for 5 seconds or something like that. That would be much more useful for us, at least. But
yeah, so this is more of it's going to lean more towards DPS because they can hold the debuff up longer.
Yeah, I think so. But since it is random procs, even if there will be close-ish to 10% of your health, it's going to be too random to really save your life. And this is going to be there to reduce your overall damage taken, which is kind of what the diamond trinket we have now kind of does this anyway. This is more a bigger proc, less.
Yeah. We also have the Mind Thief's Eldritch Clasp, which is a belt. Does not have a penalty on the stats. And And whenever you fall below 25% health, you restore about 50k, 70k, depending on your eye level. And then you take that same damage over 10 seconds, and it has a 3-minute cooldown. What's your opinion on that?
That's obviously like a really good one. Like I love this one. I love the design of it. It has like 75% of the amount of secondary stats as a belt of the same. It's got a little bit of a secondary stat loss.
Okay.
But not much. And definitely, absolutely. This obviously as a tank, you will always use this one if you can get it. Like there's not really much negative to bring this. Obviously, defensive one only doesn't do any damage when it procs or anything. You will only use it if you are.
Well, it does do damage when it procs.
Yeah, to you. But yeah, no, I think it's a good one. It's basically baking in the trinket we got from Mithrax into a belt with very low cost to using it. So really good. I could even see it being very useful for for tanks, for DPSers as well. Like against some fight that might be very defense heavy, you know, because you still get a heal. You know, you take less damage. You take less damage than the heal you get. So.
Yeah, on a fight like where you have to, I got a fight like where you might have to solo soak a mechanic,
especially.
Like that. Yeah.
But
even a fight like Jaina, for example, where there's a lot of damage, you know, you take, if you go below 25, suddenly you're healed up to by 75k health or whatever number that is, and then you take like 90% of that damage again, but it's technically still a net gain in health. It just pushes that. Like the moment you go low a little bit further up, and you might have more time to react to it or whatever. I'm not saying it's a great one, but it's still an interesting choice for a DPS as well, like with a very minimal loss of secondaries, for example.
It's probably something you're going to bring to progress because mistakes happen, essentially.
Yep.
Now, there's also some legs that gives you regular haste, but no other secondary. And it gives you a chance that whenever you attack something with lower health than you will do 200k damage. No, you will sacrifice 200k. Help. You will sacrifice 2,000 of your health to deal 4,000 damage. Yeah.
Yikes.
You just one-shot him.
Yeah, I mean, you take like 2.5k health, 2k damage or something, and get a 4k heal.
2k, 4k.
I mean, you're never that's never gonna kill you, that 2k hit. And you're gonna do a bit of damage. So it's literally just a little bit of damage output. I'm not quite sure about the math. If it should outweigh the loss of secondary stats. So if you're going offensive, then definitely. No, as a tank
as a DPS, yeah, as a DPS, yeah, definitely. Like as a DPS metric. 2 million.
Yeah, 2 million, 200,000 damage. But like, it's interesting. I don't think they're amazing or anything like that. But in the end, as well, because they are guaranteed 425 in Mythic, like you're just gonna slap them on and use them. And the taking damage, that's not gonna matter. Doing a bit of extra damage is nice.
Yeah. There's also Polearm, which I don't think we're going to be using as prots.
No primary stat, no strength, no agility, no nothing.
No, when it procs, it gives primary stats. But yeah, that one might be good for DKs and monks, I believe.
Maybe
probably druids as well. Yeah, if they manage to get inside the raid, it's probably good for them as well.
If they get into a guild.
There's also some trinkets. One which is a
going about the polearm. That's what I would have liked to see on the gloves instead. Like when the bubble bursts, you get some stats.
Yeah,
that might be stacking. So that's what I would have wanted to see. But it's pretty cool that two ends get something. But I wouldn't say that our gloves make up for their trident, or polearm. It's a bit whatever.
Well, this is also a way for them to do like an actual polearm. Like in the because they don't do a ton of polearms in raids because like not many specs can actually use them viably. It's the way for them to do it in a reasonable way, as far as I'm concerned.
There's also 2 trinkets that we can use. Technically a third, but that one is So one is the Lurker's Insidious Gift, which is primary stats and it has an on use. that increases your mastery by a ton for 30 seconds. And every second you gain a debuff that does more and more damage. It does 641, 1,280, and more and more and more, adding each time. You can activate it again, or on the PTR you could just click off the buff to remove the both effects, and it has a 2-minute cooldown. Now, what's your first impressions of a trinket like this that does low damage, but then does a lot of damage and gives you a ton of mastery?
I think it's a really nice design because it gives you a lot of stats and you can choose how long you want to have this on up, basically, right? So it gives it for 30 seconds if you can survive taking the shadow damage application up to 30 seconds. And I think that's a very rewarding trinket that you can basically use, and then just you choose when you want to turn this dot off, because at some point it's going to be too much, maybe, especially during progression or raiding. If you want to just play it safe, well, a 10-second one, or maybe your main burst is 10 or 15 seconds, and then after that, it doesn't really matter. It's not worth the sacrifice in health, so then you turn.
I wonder if spell warding would immune it.
Well,
For the last
probably
10%.
we can test that.
We can test that later.
Most likely, yeah, because it's worked in the past with trinkets such as the one from
I'll test it now.
So-
You guys talk.
What, Skella?
I'll test it now. You guys talk.
Oh, okay.
Oh, thanks, Skull.
Thank you.
So just speaking just generally about these items, Trekkie, there's a lot of kiss curse effects in here, and
Well-
for people that don't know what that means, did you want to go on, Wally? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, there's one more trinket.
Oh, sorry. We'll get to the trinket, and then I can ask a more general question.
Yeah. Then there's the Idol of Indiscriminate Consumption. You eat anyone. It gives you primary stats, and it says activate on a 1-minute cooldown, where you steal health from people near you, either enemies or allies. You do about 7,000 to 9,000 damage, and you heal for double that. So it's just it's a mini Spiritling totem. What's your opinion?
I think it's a pretty cool trinket. I don't actually remember if it's off global cooldown or not.
I believe it's not.
I think it's not off global cooldown.
Skelly, do you want to check?
Oh, what?
Do you want to check if it's on the
heal
global?
trinket? Or what trinket?
They can also hear
The
your
idol.
music on stream, by the way.
Oh, okay. It's muted now. Oh no, now it's unmuted. What the hell?
I think it's a cool trinket overall. Like, it heals you. It deals a bit of damage, but that's obviously not that much. Like 7k health from it's up to 7 targets, or 7 to 10k health. I think it's realistically it's going. And then it's going to heal you for about 150k health or something. So it's like a very strong version of Hellstone on a 1-minute cooldown. It's not as good as Shield would be, like Machimba's would be, but obviously that one's such a low value comparatively now.
Machimba at this eye level is 80k, by the way.
Yeah, so we compare Machimbas against the healer trinket. The healer trinket is like so much better in terms of an actual absorb.
Yeah, it's 130k at the same eye level.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have the issue with this one that it's on the global cooldown and it's a heal, so you have to use it reactively, kind of like lighter protector. So both of them being on the global cooldown, a little bit hard to get it to figure out when you should use them perfectly, but they're gonna be useful. And obviously, it's like being really the only tanking trinket in this tier, like defensive
Expansion.
tanking trinket. It's gonna be you're gonna probably use it, and then
I think it's gonna be really good on Mythic Plus. Like really good on Mythic Plus.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely gonna shine on fights where you have a limited or low amounts of healing on you. In raids, that's not always the case unless you're on a situation on the boats on blockade where you are separated from some of your healers and you have a lot less healing on you personally, and then all these shield trinkets and whatever always shine in those situations.
Yeah.
I've been comparing it to like a small Spiritling totem, like a personal Spiritling totem.
I mean, the damage you do from the other people are like nothing.
Yeah,
so.
but sort of it's a joke.
Yeah. Yeah, I see it more like a health stone, honestly, personally.
Yeah.
You make sure that you can use it to make sure that you're topped off before a hit, a big hit, for example, or you're starting going low and you can use it as the next global cooldown, kind of like Lighter Protector, but maybe Lighter Protector is on cooldown. So you always try to use Lighter Protector first, and then if Lighter Protector is on cooldown, then you're getting ready with Idle and making sure that you get that one off when you can.
All right,
Yeah.
so the heal
Yeah.
trinket is not on the GCD,
Woo.
and spell warding the damage just misses while the spell warding is up.
Wow.
Nice.
Pretty
And I
good.
used spell warding first, and then used the trinket, and they were still building stacks, so it was just missing.
That's good to know. Thanks, Skeletor. So Frankie, kind of get back to the question that I wanted to ask, that I was kind of alluding to, is that a lot of these items are what they call kiss. At least Blizzard calls them what quote unquote kiss curse. And a lot of people that might not know what that is, basically it means that it gives a really large benefit, but at the same time it also has a very large downside. So like the trinket, like the trinket that gives mastery, yeah, you get a large chunk of mastery, but you also take the large chunk of shadow damage as well, or a small amount of shadow damage. Do they need to do like what are your thoughts on like that type of design specifically, of just getting a very large benefit but also getting the negative as well?
I think it depends a lot on what the negative aspect is, but generally I like them. When it comes to tanking, you don't like random procs and effects are not super useful. And if that Kiss and Curse effect, as you say, is a use effect, especially, then you can use it to a very, very good degree, because maybe for against a big ability or against on a period of where it's going to be much higher damage, for example. And then maybe the curse effect isn't that bad because it saved you from a lot of damage in the first place. So I think that's generally a good sign of a well-designed trinket. But if you compare it to other trinkets that doesn't have the curse effect and just like a decent effect, then obviously this trinket has to have a really good use to be worth using for the negative. And I do think that sometimes that has a chance of edging it towards a little bit too far towards overpowered. Depends on the curse.
Yeah, that makes sense. And people that maybe aren't as familiar with the concept of the kiss curse, there are some kiss curse mechanics in the game right now, or there were some in Legion. So, for example, like in like Cathedral, like some of those mobs, especially early on, they dropped that fire bubble thing. So if you stood inside of it, you got like a haste buff, but you also took damage. So like there was some risk reward to being able to do something like that or to work with something like that. So there are mechanics in the game that you encounter that kind of play off of that like design idea. But now
There's
we're
actually
kind of seeing it in items, like I guess in the raid.
there's two instances of that in this raid actually. There's an opulence where you get into the damage room. If you drop below 50% health, you get a buff.
Right. Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
great point,
and there's
Wally.
also Treasure's Covenant.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
on an item.
Yes. Those are
Like I said,
definitely two good points.
yeah, like I said, I do like those effects. It's much as a tank, especially. It's much more. I feel like it feels more better basically when you are in control of when you get this. When you get this effect, both the bad part and the good part or whatever. But yeah, I like seeing them in general, and I don't really think that anyone really benefits from going sub 50%, but everyone always tries an opulence, for example, just to get that buff. It's not super strong, and it's not a very hard fight in general. But I mean, if they start doing these more, then we might see more variants of it that might be more interesting. But it's generally like the feeling of like when you play around these and you play around them well, that's a very satisfying feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I think we definitely agree with that a lot. So in a raid, in a dungeon, you definitely need tanks. At least you need one tank at least. And there's been some changes to tanking in Battle for Azeroth from Legion and previous expansions, specifically around making tanks more dependent on healers, removing things like self-sustain, magic damage reduction. For example, like it's no like Shield of the Righteous only increases your armor. Like, what do you think about changes like this to kind of make tanks more dependent on healers or dependent on external forces in the raid and less like self-sustaining or less independent?
I think a case could be made for definitely. I think it's a good idea to make them less self-sustainable than the end of Legion. Just like the end of Warlords of Draenor was a little bit too much. Like at that point, like nobody, like the tanks are basically blank slates. Like you might as well remove them from the raid frames. No healer really pays attention to anyway. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit too far the wrong way. And in Battle for Azeroth, they went maybe a bit too far in the other way, where you're a little bit too, you have no self-sustain, and even if you do have self-sustain, it's off the global cooldown, which obviously ended up hurting us and warriors at the time as well. Really, really poor, like a lot. And I enjoy rhythms of self-sustain. I do like being able to play around yourself, like being completely helpless if the healer's not healing you is not a good feeling. But requiring him to help you out a little bit now and then, or like half the time, I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's what we kind of want to try to land, I think.
Do you think self-sustain made tanking interesting? Because there's a lot of people that say like that's what made tanking really fun, especially in like Mists of Pandaria.
Well, I mean, it depends on it depends on the tank itself. But I would say the short answer to that is yes. If you play properly and that makes that you able to stay alive, I mean that's what you want as a tank, right? You want to be in control of your own survivability. If that comes from making sure that you are damage mitigating everything properly, or by self healing everything back, then that's just kind of two things that cover the same, like two different ways of doing the same thing. But obviously mitigating the damage effectively still requires it to be healed up eventually, which means that if your damage or your death time between 100% health and 0 is long enough so that off heals or accidental cleave heals or whatever hits you and gets you back up, if you are mitigating properly, then I think that's a good design.
Are there other ways to make tanks interesting? So, for example, like if it wasn't self-sustain, let's say they just made every tank had just interesting mechanics or utility or rotation. So, like for example, if you look at like the monk rotation, it's very static. If you look at the druid rotation, it is what it is. Demon hunter to a lesser extent, which forces them to spec into say fracture or spirit bomb. Do you think just fixing the rotations, fixing mechanics would also make tanks interesting while also controlling their self-sustain? Do you think they could solve that problem from like a rotational perspective? Is basically what I'm asking.
I think it has a lot to do with it. Yes, having your class feel like that your buttons matter is very important. Even if that is to empower your self-sustain, that might be coming later on, or empowering your self survivability by reducing more damage. Like having your buttons matter and having rotation feel like you're doing something. Like sometimes, especially when I play my monk, it feels like I don't even care if I'm pressing my buttons anymore. It's like it doesn't really do anything because I'm not surviving by pressing them. I'm surviving by just pressing my brews.
Yeah,
right.
That is
And
that is like an issue because they're not equally strong. Like as a paladin, I can get by by just casting Shield of Righteousness and Judgment. I don't need to cast the others. I'll make
I think
my healers will make do.
I think that's a little bit. Yeah, I mean that's you obviously don't want to be that case. I do think that of most of the tanks, I think paladins are probably the tank that you actually feel like you want to press the buttons more than some others. Warriors is like could technically get by with just shield slamming and does nothing else.
Well, I think anger management changes it for them, right? It's like you just don't like if you have like anger management is what forces them to be able to have the more engaging rotation with the shorter cooldowns on avatar, demo shout, etc. Right?
Yep. Yeah. So like anything that just engages you to press your buttons to make them feel like sometimes when you press your Vengeful, especially when with Paladins, when you press Judgment, you feel like you're catching up, right? You know, you're starting to go low and you're going low on charges, whatever. But every time you press that Judgment button, you feel like, oh yeah, I'm catching up a little bit. I feel like now I'm a little bit safer, and like that does a lot to how you enjoy playing the class. Like a lot of times you just kind of get bored playing Monk, just like I got bored playing Druid in in Antaurus, for example, because it was just so boring, but it was just so good.
Yeah, like if we go back to Mist of Pandaria, you had Holy Power, where Crusader Strike, Judgment, they both generated Holy Power, and Avenger Shield generated power if you had Grand Crusader proc. Like all those 3 abilities mattered. Now you have Judgment mattering, Avenger Shield a little bit mattering, but you don't really notice it even if it's not there. And Hammer of the Righteous only matters if you get a proc.
Consecrate, you just want to stand in once every
well, that's
every 12 seconds.
you just overcast it anyways.
Like I really hate, like honestly, one of the worst things like would be Battle for Azeroth. Battle for Azeroth. One of the worst things I with the class design after this was honestly, in my opinion, the Consecrate change. I would love to just be able to overlap them, yes, just press it every time, and it actually being a benefit instead of like I could literally not press this and just do it next time it rotates up, and I would technically not have lost anything.
Yeah, like
even though the self heal was brought off global cooldown, I kind of miss the Consecrate change more.
I say, in terms of gameplay, I think you might be right. In terms of like feel, I would prefer the Hand of Protector. Just because Hand of Protector, every time you cast it, you feel like something's happening. Consecration is just a bit more damage here, bit more damage there. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like having more consecrations would be nice. Even if they were to nerf the number by like 30% less damage, but you could have 2 up at all times. I would be happy with that. Which would be DPS increase.
It felt like the whole it felt like the whole self-healing thing being off global cooldown was just something that didn't want to budge on. So it's like, okay, well, I mean, everyone's losing it, so fuck it if we're losing it too, you know?
Yeah, but ignore Pain's back.
I had to rewire my brain.
Ignore Pain's back, though.
Speaking of the global cooldown, we actually have a question on that. We were going to ask it later on, but we can just skip to that now. So it's been a year since it's been implemented into the game. It's implemented in the BFA alpha/beta. Like, what do you think? Like, has it been a success? Like, across at all? Like, do they need to revisit this in that, like, specifically for tanks?
I kind of just wish that they do a full 180 for the next expansion, just get it back, because it was just more interesting. We were talking about the self-healing before, like,
right,
and it's not really about the strength of the self-healing, it's about being able to use it when you want it. And like, obviously it turned out to be a big issue for Prot Warriors, partially because Ignore Pain was so weak. You know, if they would have buffed the value of Ignore Pain by like 5 times stronger, but it wouldn't have been as bad. Would have had other issues, but the problem was like it was obviously giving such a small shield for a full global cooldown, and you could press it like every time. Meanwhile, us, like, we can use a lighter protector once every 12 seconds or whatever, but for the rest of the time we can't spam it. We can't try to spam it, you know. So it's just kind of sitting there.
Yeah, but the issue is because of it's like not available often, right? I looked at my logs. And I looked at myself doing Agramar. I were healing myself every 4th melee. Like, melee, heal, melee, 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 heal, and so on. Now, I looked at one of my more recent logs, and I healed myself like twice a minute.
Yeah. You heal yourself once every 30 seconds, because you need to make sure that these heals matter when they're done, because you can't just spew them out. Plus, it takes a global cooldown, which means that it upsets your rotation every time. And it's very intrusive. And the way Paladins work then and still work, that lighter protector being off the global cooldown is really important for its survivability, technically, because we take a hit and then we instantly lighter protector back. But if we sit on it now, and this is a big issue on Jaina, for example, because she hits so fast, that's so hard. And if you're getting ready to like next hit, I'm not gonna shield righteous. I'm just gonna heal back, and then the moment you get hit, you press Light of Protector, and then you turn out that you dodged it, and you're like, oh, well, that was nice.
Yeah.
Is that what you say? What the biggest problem with the class or with the spec right now is that Light of the Protector, Hand of the Protector is on the global cooldown.
Yeah, I would say that's a big issue because we have a limited uptime on our active mitigation. So we need to really choose when we use this, and when we're not using our active mitigation, we need our other tools to basically back up or help us out. And Light of Protector is just not doing that whatsoever now. Yeah, not iron rates. In Mythic Pluses is actually pretty good because your time between 100% health and dead is so much longer that you could usually squeeze in a global cooldown. You're at like 40-50% health, and you might not be dead next global cooldown, which means that you can start preparing to Light of Protector yourself, and then you use it when you maybe go a little bit lower or whatever. And if all else fails, you have Light Lay on Hands, which is off global cooldown. But in raid, there's just not that time. You're 60% health, and the next melee hit is gonna kill you. But if you started pressing another button, you're gonna die. You can't suddenly choose or interrupt your rotation to start Light of Protector instead. And if that's gonna save your life, then that's too late.
Or you could have just gotten like as we were just talking about, like, we just generally need more external healing. You could have just been healed in the 1.5 second, like a big heal by multiple healers or whatever. So that even wastes it even in the other direction, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So
during the time you start pressing Light of Protector, some other heals could just popped up, and you're like, oh. Yeah, sometimes you're so low, and you're like
for like 1%.
Yeah, well, sometimes I'm so low, and I'm trying to heal myself, but like I realize that heal's not gonna go off early enough, so instead I use Ardent Defender, and then I'm not gonna need Light of Protector. I might not need it then, so I sit there and wait with it, and then suddenly like other healers, just everyone spamming me up because I'm so low for so long, like for a while, and then I'm full HP, and it's like Light of Protector didn't even go off. I didn't need to use that.
Yeah,
personally, I think it's just well, I just want to add another quick point here.
It's fine.
So personally, I just think like, if you just think about like the way it's like designed right now, it's designed on your current missing health in the moment, but that moment could be up to 1.5 seconds later, and your health is very fluctuating, can fluctuate in like a raid encounter. So like I think they would have to redesign this ability if they want it to be on the global cooldown in the next expansion. At least that's my opinion. Like it has to work differently on a different formula, right? It has to be like more like Death Strike, like where it's flexible based on a window or something.
Or like I
Death
suggested
Strike's
to you,
an issue as well.
or like I suggested to you earlier, Lincoln, have it just be the lowest point you were in the last 1.5 seconds.
Yeah.
That could be. I would go with the stat that Light of Protector was off the global cooldown, but the moment you used it, it induced a global cooldown, or a longer global cooldown even, or something like.
Yeah,
one of those kiss and curse effects, right? Light of Protector induces a 3-second cooldown, or like you get pacified for 3 seconds after using it, right? You get a longer cooldown, but it's off the global cooldown, which means that you can use it and really save your life, and then you have to sit there and wait or hope for the best for a few seconds, but it saved your life.
Or just it would add to the current global cooldown. Like if you had 0.5 seconds remaining on the current global cooldown, it would then be a 2-second cooldown.
Right.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And I suspect that Hand of the Protector, the fact that exists as a separate talent, is part of this, because even being able to cast a heal of that magnitude on another player off GCD is very powerful. So like I think they would have to tune around that as well. So like if they had to like add up, like I know in PvP they have like the 40% penalty. Like even if they reduce that effect by a certain percentage, even in PvE, I think that people would definitely still accept that and still use that talent, right?
Yeah. Like Hand of Protector right now is really weak, so I would say so. I use it sometimes when you're doing Mythic Pluses with healers that you have no idea how useful they are, and might be doing healing intensive affix like Grievous or Burst.
Yeah, it's really good on Grievous. Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. Speaking of like tank balance, or Wally asked the question about tank balance in terms of Battle of Desire lore, mentioned Monk, Paladin, Blood Decay, etc. But we didn't mention 2 tanks, Demon Hunters and Druid. Blizzard posted a bunch of stuff yesterday about potentially what changes they could see in 8.2 to address some of their underlying problems. Like, what do you think about those changes? Have you seen them? Seen the list? And like, what do you think the problem with these two tanks is? And do you think that Blizzard is addressing them?
I do think they're addressing them, but I think they're just kind of putting in a band-aid fix for it because nobody plays Demon Hunter in raids. Very few people play Druids in raids, so they're like, oh, we gotta obviously make them a little bit more viable without changing how they work overall. So they're buffing their passive mitigation by 5% here, or your armor mitigation by 10 or 20% more armor from gear. I think it was for Demon Hunters. So a little bit small changes here and there that just might bring them up a little bit better, which is nice. But I think Demon Hunters have the underlying problem, kind of like DKs, where their self heal is just on the global cooldown. It's relatively weak compared to DKs as well, like very weak, I think, unless you talk AoE tanking, right? Which they're good at. And their self heal for Druids, for example, is also really weak and is on the global cooldown, which I would say is kind of the overlaying issues when you have other tanks that have very good self sustain. I mean, it's always going to help. More health and stamina. That's kind of what they did to warriors, and then it took a bit of time, a little bit of gear, and then suddenly they're really.
So are the Druid problems even quantifiable? Like because we know like Demon Hunter is a really clear issue. When they have demon spikes up, they're still vulnerable to die, but then when they don't have it up, like they're really like super at risk. But I think Druid is a little bit nebulous because I think a lot of people agree that the class doesn't play super well. There's a lot of utility on the class. There were affinities that they can't really utilize, which they are trying to address through the different passives that they're adding. But is the Druid problem, is it more of like a core design issue, or can they actually fix it with numbers?
I think it's a bit of a core design, especially for Druids, because Druids, I think kind of reminds me again with the monks, right? Either their stagger is really, really good, or it's really, really shit. Or like either stagger is good or great, or it's really, really shit. And Druids are kind of the same because they have such high amounts of stamina by themselves, and then they have their active negation, which not only can they have 100% uptime on it, but they can also stack this to make it even stronger. And if 100% uptime on this active mitigation is all that's required, you're going to be good. This is going to be a great tank. But if you need to constantly stack 2-3 to survive, then suddenly you're a really bad tank.
Suddenly you're a paladin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
suddenly you're a Demon Hunter.
Yeah, and then you have Demon Hunters, who are basically paladins, where you're really strong when you have active mitigation up, but outside active mitigation, you are really weak. And then I think they have less uptime on their demon spikes than we have with SOTR. It just doesn't make much sense to me outside of, they can randomly get their... is that still a thing, that they get random metamorphs? Yeah.
Yes.
So that's, in my mind, that's like, okay, you have less uptime on your active mitigation than paladins, but you have this random proc that you might just suddenly become really strong and really tanky.
That's not a good design for tank,
when
though.
That's not a good design.
When this happens, that means that you're buying yourself time for demon spikes to recharge back up. That's kind of how I see it a lot of times.
But just a couple extra things, I guess, on Demon Hunters, and then we just need to kind of proceed here because there's another big topic we actually have to get to. So their cooldowns are not as good. So like meta is not as good as Guardian, and like Firebrand's not as good as Ardent Defender. The other problem with having the Gluttony talent, which is the one that turns you into the random demon, it's on the same row as Spirit Bomb. You basically have to trade. You have to trade your rotational fun for that talent, which is kind of like bullshit in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So like they just have a lot of problems that I don't know if they're going to be able to address it in like an 8.2 or an 8.3. Like they literally need to be redesigned, or like massive talent changes, massive ability changes in the next expansion.
There's actually more issues than that, because Feed the Beast, I believe.
Yeah.
Or Feed the Demon.
Feed the Demon, yeah.
Yeah.
It's on the same row as Fracture, which is another problem.
So essentially, they're tools to help them live.
Yeah.
Is competing against fun.
Yeah, it's competing against their fun. So kind of just moving it, I guess we kind of just touched on some of the stuff coming in 8.2, I guess, in terms of some tank balance things. They also announced the new Heart of Azeroth system, Trekkie, and we kind of wanted to get your get you to, get your opinion, the initial impressions, and all of that. So I think we're gonna put it up on. Is Skeletor there?
It's already up.
Okay, so we're gonna put it up on stream. And then we're kind of just read through them. Molly, do you want to lead this part?
Yeah, sure. We have Ages of the Deep, which is major power. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. That reduces damage taken by a flat amount. And whenever you get damaged, you heal for an even larger amount. And its minor power is that you get versatility for each enemy near you, up to a cap of, I believe, 5. And you get a small dot every 4 seconds per stack, so up to 5 again.
And then a small hot.
Hot, yes, sorry. A small dot would be nice. So what's your first impression of this?
I mean, it's pretty decent, I guess. The low cooldown is nice. What I don't really like is the... we obviously don't know about tuning on all these, so this might be all up the walls and everything. But I don't like it when abilities do like, oh, it absorbs each attack by up to X amount. Because that makes it really strong in low damage situations and then really weak in high damage situations, right? I would just prefer if this was like 20% or 10% or whatever, right? And so I don't really like the number.
Yeah. The minor power increases depending on each enemy near you, so it's clear that it's a Mythic Plus trait.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it.
Do you think it fits better there then? As opposed to a rage?
I think so. Yeah, if you look at it that way, yeah, for sure. And it's going to be really good with Paladins as well, because with Last Defender, because you're already taking less damage for every more target you have. Now this one only goes like... But when you AoE tank 5 targets, you take less damage because you have more versatility. And then you also get a small heal, which is perfect for AoE tanking. And when you go below 35%, the versatility amount is doubled, which is nice. But you're not going to stay below 35% that long. So
no, but you might heal for a bit larger with the extra versatility. Whew.
Yeah, I mean, in Mythic Plus is like the time between 35% and dead is much, much longer than it is in raids, because it might actually be more than one melee hit. But so yeah, I mean, it feels like it's very much an AoE tanking ability, and I think the number 2K doesn't seem very big. When you're AoE tanking a lot of stuff, then suddenly it becomes a fair amount.
Yeah, I'm gonna introduce the nightmare scenario about this thing, right? And it can be condensed into one word: monk. Just stagger that.
Yeah.
Does it work with stagger? It's gonna be fun to find out.
Probably won't work with stagger, but stagger is like one relatively, like it's going to be a sizable hit every 10 seconds, whatever. But it's an interesting way because it also perfectly works with monks when you're tanking, because you reduce the damage from each hit. Not only that, but when he's active, it also heals you every time you get damaged. So effectively, right, if these numbers are to be trusted, I'm guessing that if like you remove 2,000 health from a hit, and then as well you get healed for 2.7k from the rest of the hit. So if there's a 5k hit on you, sorry.
Yeah, like it's effectively about 5k. Was I was gonna say.
Yeah, so if there's a 5k hit, that's basically gets completely cancelled out, because you absorb 2k and then you take a 3k hit and I get 2.7k heal back. Obviously, very little hits for 5k, but it reduces 5k damage from every single hit from when AoE tanking. So yeah, definitely an AoE tanking ability, definitely good for Mythic Pluses. So
yeah. Then we have Burning Embrace. Burning Embrace, which is a 2-minute cooldown, where you sacrifice 10% of your life to deal AoE damage based on that. So if you have 200k health, it will do 20k damage and so on. And you will also heal for 10% of your max health per enemy hit, up to a maximum of 10. Sorry, a maximum of 5, so 50%. And its passive is a Tyrant Velhari trinket. And it gets lost if you drop below 35% health. That seems to be like the magic number for most of these traits.
Yeah. It depends. Like, this could be a cool like damage output trinket. because it will just do fire damage. The sacrifice health is I feel like it's kind of redundant because as long as you hit one target, you will get that 10% health back, right?
Yeah,
So I guess the only thing is that you can't use it sub 10% health.
it to me it looks more like a, hey, you're a tank, you sacrifice your health. Nope, heal it. Like it's sort of a fun thing.
For me, I don't see the point of it healing you if it's sacrificing your health, because as long as you hit one target, that is completely cancelled out. So I think it would be cooler for a tank, from a tank perspective, to be like sacrificing your health because you have so much of it, and then you deal fire damage to enemies. But this is probably just to have the amount of damage scale with your health, so that it doesn't scale with attack power or strength.
Yeah. People have been comparing this to Eye of Tyr with the shoulders for Mythic Plus. Do you think this will be the good snap aggro that we've been looking for?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, probably like 10% of your health is a fair amount.
Yeah, it's about 40k to everything.
Yeah, and especially when we get into Ivashara, gearing and whatever, we might even have like almost 450k. So about 40k DPS damage on everything on a 2-minute cooldown. So it's definitely a lot of snap aggro. And then you gotta have to. But the problem here comes with: are you gonna use it as snap aggro heal, a snap aggro ability, or as a heal ability? Because it does heal you as well, but it's on the global cooldown, so it's kind of like a lighter protector, but it scales on AoE tanking, so it's obviously going to be useless in raids as well. In terms of healing, you know.
Yeah, people have been also talking about the minor effect, right? That increases your maximum health by up to 50k thereabouts. And they've been asking or thinking that maybe we should use this as a sort of a defensive trait just to reduce the one hits, which would reduce it would effectively absorb 50k damage once a minute, right?
Yeah, I mean that depends on how often you go below 35% and as well. So I think the point I really like about this is that I like it when there's an effect that you're actively trying to stay away from going below 35%, because the moment you do go below 35%, you're a little bit weaker after it. So instead of just trying to survive, you're trying to stay above that 35%, because that gives you a little bit of extra benefit kind of thing. And if you're up against a big burst that might do you full health and damage, and then you just end up having 50,000 more health. But then that depends on how often does this ability come. Does it come once every minute, which it takes for it to stack up? Or does it come every 30 seconds, which means that you only have it half stacked up and then you instantly lose it? And I generally don't like these kind of abilities that it gives you health and then you lose it when you go below health. Like at the time of Valhalla, I think it was notorious. Nobody really used it because it wasn't really that useful for us.
It was 80% at the time, right? Or am I misremembering it?
Was it the high, maybe? No,
I think it was really high.
Possibly. I do know the Druids used it because they had another stamina scaling, so it was a little bit better for them.
60%.
But it still wasn't. Yeah. That's obviously a lot worse than losing at 35. So.
Yeah. Then we have the engine of ceaseless progress. The active creates an. Can you not scroll? Creates a field of Azerite energy at your creates a field of Azerite energy at the current location for 10 seconds. While standing in the area, you gain a stack of Engine of Haste, Mastery, and Crit every 0.5 seconds. While inside the area, you take 10% reduced damage. And when you activate it, the stack count of each thing is double. Yeah, you should probably have read the minor one first, huh? The minor one gives you a stack of Haste, Mastery, Crit every 2 seconds. And then when you reach 10 stack of either of those, it overcharges and doubles the amount, doubles the effect of them. after which the stacks are removed. And whenever you get a stack, you have a 20% chance to get an additional stack and 10% chance to get all 3 instead of random one. So it's a lot of haste, mastery, and crits, and a on-use that gives you 10% reduced damage.
I think it's a cool one. It's secondary stats overloaded kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, I like the fact that it's a 10% damage reduction. Not that that is a lot, but it also does double the amount of secondaries. And while secondaries aren't always super strong, like in a very short time span in raids, that is a lot of secondary stats for Mythic pluses.
Yep.
I don't know. It sounds very complicated just reading it. It's like
Yeah.
trying to grasp your head around it. So it's like, I don't know if I still fully understand it. But like, okay, this is a lot of secondary stats, and you can use it to make it much stronger, and then eventually it falls off because you used it.
The way that I understand it is like every once in a while you get you progressively get a lot of stacks and a lot of secondaries, and every once in a while you get a bunch more, and you can use it to sort of get a game when you're going to get those stacks.
Which is nice. I mean, especially if you're looking at Pro Paladins when you have abilities like Seraphim, you want to make sure that those secondary stats are when you want them and not just random.
Yep. And then we have something that you might enjoy, because I know you enjoy the trinket version of it sometimes. The Essence of Infinity. It's only a passive, and it's a cheat death that whenever you die, you regen 10% of your max health, and you take 85% reduced damage for up to 10 seconds or until you're healed above 70% health. And it has a 7.5 minute cooldown, and its passive effect gives you versatility, which is then reduced if you die.
Yeah. And we were talking about the one-sided trinket a little bit before, like the pre-show, or whatever. But one of the reasons why I use it sometimes, like doing especially if like when you're starting to get familiar with a fight, and because you don't know what parts of the fight will kill you, I do think exactly like that. This one's going to be very useful to swap in for those scenarios. Like, you don't know which abilities might kill you, where you are, like in the timing wise in the fight, going to be running out of charges or being low on healing, being just very in the case of dying very soon. Now it's just nice because it just lets you raid on autopilot. You don't have to think too much, and if it procs, then you have to, like, when it procs, you just sit up straight in your chair and just play the game, kind of thing. The difference is, however, that when it comes to trinkets, there's not that many trinkets that are good to really like choose that does much of a difference. You could get a little bit more strength, you could get a little bit more haste. But unless you're chasing damage numbers, or like you really need more damage on an ad or something like that, then that doesn't really change much up. And the difference here is that you can choose another essence that is greatly effective elsewhere. So I don't think this is going to be a choice that you will generally just use for all of progress, but I do think that it definitely has uses to be like, hey, the first 10 pulls of this fight, I'm not sure how much damage this boss is going to do. I'm not sure where I'm going to run out of stuff. And that is just something that you have to learn yourself of when that happens and when you're going to run out of stuff. And I do think that this has those uses there. You can put it in there. And I do really like the fact that it gives you another effect that if the essence then procs, you are getting punished. I've always said that I love a trinket like the Blood Sunday's Bargain, like the Dagger Haft, that maybe was a little bit stronger. But when it procs, if you die, it slaps you in the face by like giving you no benefits. I would love the Blood Sunday's Bargain to just like, maybe if it gave you a bunch of haste as well. But the moment it procs, it gives you no strength, no haste, no nothing. Because you've died. And that's your main goal to avoid as a tank. The trinket saved you, but now it's not saving you. Now it's not doing anything for you anymore,
Yeah. And I feel like it also has the most important part of a cheat death trinket, it saves you. Like, it keeps you alive until you're at the save point.
Yeah. It reduces your damage taken by. I mean, has to be a placeholder. There's no way it's 85%.
Yeah,
Because
like
even if
I'm
you don't last
expecting
for 8
15,
seconds.
20.
Yeah, 25 probably. 25 or 30. I can
Yeah.
see 33 or whatever. Third. And it goes away after 10 seconds or until you're topped about 70%. So a lot of times the problem with the trinket like bonds of this bargain could be that, oh well, even if the trinket would have procced, you would have died like a second later, or it wasn't strong enough to proc or stuff like that. It's like doesn't really save your life even if it procs, which does happen, definitely, but not really all the time. But it does happen, and this one basically straight up makes sure that you are going to be kept alive for another 10 seconds or up to 70%.
Yeah.
If
And
it
then
is
after-
85, then it's going to be insanely strong. But because that basically just makes you able and safe to tank something that does an insane amount of damage for 10 seconds.
Right,
The
and you
moment
can
you
even
die,
Unless the
And
healer enhance you, and then you're very upset.
yeah, you can probably even do like another mechanic, right? Like if
Yeah.
if you know another mechanic is 80%, 85% damage reduction plus armor plus whatever else, you'll probably survive that too. So
Did someone say solo tanking wrong? Could actually work with this. You could use this for the third hit.
yeah,
Either way,
why when you have Bob?
because that's the first. No, but second maybe.
Yeah, no.
So then there's the hardened obsidian essence, or as many else who know it, divine protection. So it's a 45-second cooldown, and you reduce all damage you take by 40% for 2 seconds, and then 20% for the next 2 seconds. And its passive is that whenever you fall below 35% health, it grants you armor, and then half of that, 7,500, 3,000, 750 armor for the next 4 seconds. So it's double the duration of the minor thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really cool one because a lot of times when you need, I hope it's off global cooldown, but the moment you need a cooldown, you generally need it for like a few seconds, and then a little bit weaker after that, it's generally fine.
Yeah.
If you need a longer cooldown, then you have other cooldowns for that. You have other options for it, and this is obviously just straight up just a 4-second damage reduction, right? But the first 2 seconds is 40%, and that's usually what you're gonna be able to use it
Scala?
for.
Yeah, the way that I see this one, right? It's sort of like either you need this for a mechanic, or there's another point in the fight where you want another cooldown like Ardent Defender, and then you can cover with Hardened Obsidian Essence for the cooldown that you needed later, right?
Yeah.
Like say Grong. You need a
Yeah.
cooldown for the smash, but you also need a cooldown for his melees. Now you have
Any
Hardened Obsidian
fight.
Essence for the hits.
Yeah, any fight where there's a nuke, honestly, like it's just a 40% damage reduction, and for against that nuke, it's perfect.
A nuke with relevant melees. Like, if you need to cover melees with another like class cooldown, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like if you need Ardent Defender for that, and then you can use this one for the nukes instead. It depends on how often the nuking.
I mean, this is a 45-second cooldown. You might as well just use this on everything.
Yeah, indeed.
It's pretty strong.
It's pretty nice. It's like a rune tap basically, and rune tap has had so many good uses, and that one lasts for 43 seconds, I think. Yeah, but it's only a 33% damage reduction, I think. So this is just a stronger rune tap, and the passive is nice, but it's not monumental, I think.
It's ablative shielding.
Yep.
So then we have Memory of Lucid Dreams, which is another one you have to wrap your head around. You attune yourself with the Heart of Azeroth, increasing your mana regen by 100% and leech by 900 for 10 seconds. During these 10 seconds, Shield of the Righteous recharge time is reduced by 50%. The passive does nothing for us, but it's essentially a 3-minute cooldown, 10-second duration. Shield of the Righteous is reduced by 50%.
Well, I would assume that these are obviously not Paladin specific. These are tank specific, right? So I'm assuming that increasing your mana regeneration rate will be set to increasing your resource generation
Yeah,
rate.
that's what I would
So
assume
for
as well.
Paladins, it might be that she just recharges faster. For Warriors, it might be either that you gain like 100% extra rage from all your abilities, or it might be a shield block recharge.
It might be
But
both,
I'm assuming
actually.
it's gonna be. Could be. We obviously don't use mana, so unless they are going to implement that for something, then I think it's just going to be your resource, your whatever important recharge system that whatever tank has.
Wait.
Which obviously,
Spam cleanse toxins for the heal. And for the extra versatility.
for
Genius.
the minor power.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I see. Damage is also yeah. I don't know. I mean, this is very early. I don't know exactly how this is gonna end up. So I think right now it's an instant ability that, for now at least, reduces the recharge time of Shield Righteous, which is nice, obviously. And it's kind of like a mini
Bloodlust.
Bastion of Light bulwark.
Okay. Yeah,
As,
I don't think
Bastion.
I don't think it's going to be used much, just because there's so
No.
much extra power added to stuff we don't need. Like, we don't need the leech, we don't need the resources. But something for a warrior, or a monk, or a bear, it's great.
Shout out to those warrior leech memes.
Exactly.
Shout out to Mawa.
Yep. It's gonna hate us.
Yeah. I think the next one looks really interesting, Molly.
Yeah, the Null Dynamo is a 2.3 minute cooldown, and it's an on-use where you get a 175,000 magic damage for 10 magic damage shield for 10 seconds, and also dispels you from most debuffs. And then the minor is a 15-second cooldown. Every 15 seconds, you get a 35,000 magic damage shield for 10 seconds. And whenever it expires, it does damage equal to the amount absorbed, divided.
So the interesting part about this is really how the essence system is going to work, where you're basically going to be able to find all these, because they're going to drop from different things. Like we're talking about the mythic the mythic plus trait, the first one, right? Like this is really good in mythic plus, probably going to be obtainable in mythic pluses, and you're gonna, once you've collected these, you're gonna be able to swap these out just like talent, which basically means that having this as an option, like having the option to get a shield that just absorbs like 200k magic damage for 10 seconds, can be really strong in these fights. So I'm super excited about raiding with these, because you're definitely not going to use the same one for all fights. You're going to swap these around wherever it might be needed, and that's, to me, is super exciting. So having this as an option, this is definitely not an option that you want to have at all times, but just being able to have this is like, hey, look, this fight, like this one removes I guess it doesn't remove bleeds, which was what I was thinking about. Like Conclave would be perfect if it removed bleeds, right? Because you want to do that, but that's the one thing it doesn't actually do anything, because it's magic damage. And then have a damage dealing effect to that is always a cool thing. But
So
I mean, as an option, not a baseline, I think.
So
Yeah.
Shrike in the chat brings up an interesting point. Do you think these are like legendaries in terms of like, hey, I look at X this situation and I pick this situation, I pick that one? Is that kind of? Do you think that's what they're really going for?
Yeah, I think so. Because that's like the whole asteroid system was kind of what, like, that was the new and improved version of legendaries. So obviously it completely flopped, right? And this is kind of bringing that back. You have these options just like legendaries. You can have a little bit of it set, like because you can choose one major power and then 3 minor powers spread out between all of them. And this is basically just swapping around, getting what you need. But instead of having completely random drops, these are going to be set. You know where you get these, and you can always get the this is rank 3, right? So there's 4 ranks before being legendary. So you can always get rank 1 really, really easily, but the numbers is going to be smaller.
Right.
So then you have to farm for rank 2, get a little bit of a better version. But if you look at Null Dynamo, especially because it absorbs 170k health, if that's rank 3, rank 1 is probably like 100 or 120k. Where this effect is useful, rank 1 is going to be useful enough in many cases, and rank 3 is just kind of be a bonus.
Right.
Yeah, the rank 3 would increase the passive effect where you get a larger and larger Prides, essentially.
Yeah. And the thing I really like about like Null Dynamo is that it fills a gap in the current tank toolkits of like against magic damage reduction. So like as you were mentioning, like up to this point they couldn't do a boss like Veramothras or the first boss in Maw of Souls because none of the tanks could really handle it anymore. But with something like this, they
Well, we
can
could.
assume that tanks could do it, right?
Yeah. You can definitely make a raid fight where you basically need this one. You know, as like if you
Yeah.
don't need this one, if you don't have this one available, you can kind of maybe get around with it depending on what class and what cooldowns and externals you
Yeah.
have. But it's going to be complicated. But having this in your arsenal is going to be really strong.
And what I
That would-
understand is that they're going to be fixed drop, so like it'll always drop off the second boss. So they can even do it on the 4th boss because they'll assume that you have killed the second boss, as an example, right? So they can they'll know whether you have this or not. They can make that assumption under the way the system works.
I think that could never work in a non-mythic environment, because you can. What if you have a tank that wasn't there for the first kill? He like sort of the more casual guilds. Yeah, you have a tank missing one day. Well, we killed the boss that you needed. Now we can't do this one.
Well, there's going to be a difference. I think like all of them are kind of strong, and Shrike kind of brings that up as well. It will be interesting to design around like what if the end boss just requires both of your tanks to. There is no other way than doing it with these. You know, if you're talking about a mythic high-end progression guild, then you're gonna probably get those people like that stuff anyway. In your scenario, as you mentioned, Williams, like maybe if you're progressing that really hard fight, probably not going to be one of the mid bosses or whatever, probably going to be the end bosses. So you will probably have had time to kill the first boss or the important bosses a little bit before that. But I don't think that we're ever going to have any buff. It's probably going to end up being that like you're going to have every tank, the first top 20 kills of a boss, every single tank is running this one trait or this one essence. But eventually people are going to get off it because you have enough gear.
Right.
Oh yeah, that reminds.
It's like the Grace of the Justicar thing, like right? Like Darky ran at the first kill. And now it's kind of like, okay, if you're 4 healing, you maybe want to run it, or 5 healing, you definitely don't want to run it. It's like as you get more gear, you can definitely phase that type of strategy out.
Yep. And no, that's like this one is very specific because it's magic damage, right?
Yeah.
We might have a boss that requires a big magic damage hit. That's not the case. A lot of these, like, not one of these are going to be absolutely needed, and all of them can be like, oh, well, you don't have this one. What if you have the life-saving one instead, right? Against that one burst, that's going to save your life as well, right? It's going to save your life, and then make you heal you back up and make sure you take less damage. So that one might work as a poor man's Null Dynamo, for example, if we're comparing these straight away, right? So my one might be better, but both of them might kind of work.
So the fight could be something like Mythic Talok, where you needed either you could soak it on the group or you could immunity it. Now here you can either immunity it or you can use Null Dynamo if you're one of the few classes that couldn't solo it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to mitigate weaknesses.
Now, I do think that with such strong effects, you kind of have to be very careful to make sure that you don't design a boss so that everyone needs to have this one. And that's going to be hard, but if you look at it, you look at Legendaries, for example, which are really good design, the only problem being hard to obtain and RNG to obtain the right ones. And there were definitely some fights with basically like every single Paladin who killed this boss had these 2 Legendaries, so it's just no doubt. And that's I can almost guarantee that's going to be the same with these essences.
Wait, what do you mean? It was hard to obtain the right ones? I had Uthers on in Nighthold. It was fine.
Dude,
Yeah.
Uther's was my first one. I was like this. Like I was so happy.
Yeah,
Easy.
I got mine as my because I had read that there was only 4 that you get.
Yeah, you
I
can only
had-
get 4, obviously. Right?
Yeah, I had like Cephus, Pridus, and legs, right? Before legs were good, and then I got Uthers. So it was like, I'm stuck with this.
I got Uther, Cephus, and then legs. I was pretty happy with Cephus and legs after the buffs. Really happy.
After the buffs, yeah.
Yeah, I was really happy.
Either way,
But
let's
imagine being able to get a slightly weaker version of the legendary you really want to have really easily, And yeah, it would suck because you would have a hard time getting the really good one of the rank 3. But you can get the easy one that actually gets the job done really easy.
By the way, let's continue. So we have the Sphere of Suppression, which is a 45-second cooldown that unleashes a heavy pulse of suppressive energy, reducing the move speed of all enemies within 15 yards by 7%, and reduces the damage done to you by 10% for 8 seconds. And if you hit an enemy, your move speed is increased by 50% for 8 seconds. Paladin mobility! And the minor one is that whenever an enemy hits you, their attack speed is 8% slower, and you get increased haste and attack speed for 7 seconds.
The minor on that seems really strong. I really like that.
Yeah.
It's
That reminds me, if you remember, like there was a debuff that was applied by Hand of the Righteous. Like it was a 10% damage. It sounds exactly like that in many ways.
Yeah. I'm actually worried about this one because
I
it's going to
wonder
mess.
if these are going to work on bosses, honestly.
Probably not.
Yeah,
Um,
on bosses, it's going to be kind of weird because like their attack speed is like fixed to 1.5 or whatever, or even 2.
Yeah.
Most are.
Yeah, so it's going to be really weird on bosses if you change their attack speed. And I think they've talked about that in the past, like how they didn't like I think like Frost Death Knights had a debuff.
Yeah.
Or had a mechanic where they could change boss attack speed. And they said it would cause like all types of weird problems in their systems and their code and their spaghetti. So I would be very surprised if this works on a boss.
What I'm worried about with this one, right, is that are we always going to be able to time our Shield Righteous properly now? I don't know. Like, we might just use this for the haste, and we would prefer it to not attack slower. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What you're saying is that if it attacks slower, then the Shield of the Righteous timing changes because potentially
Yes.
it could cover less attacks. Is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
so
Yeah.
instead of covering 3 with one Shield Righteous, you might cover
You might
2.9, and then
yeah.
you might just get an extra hit on you unmitigated.
I'm going to go ahead and limb and say that I don't think it's going to work on bosses straight up. I think it's just a trash kind of thing. It's also already focused heavily on AoE tanking in the first place. So.
Yeah, and
But a
move speed
45-second
and
But a 45-second cooldown to get a 50% movement speed, that could be really cool. So
Yeah.
situational for that as well. But being able to slow everything 70% isn't really something we need as a Prot Paladin, at least, because we already have the guaranteed 50%.
To be honest with you, this sounds like a PvP one, like with the movement speed. And
oh
attack speed.
yeah,
This
yeah,
sounds
you're
like
right.
this sounds like this could be like a rated BG drop.
Very, very possible. Very true.
It sounds like a CC thing. So
Yeah, like crowd control.
Crucible of Flame, 30-second cooldown. Blast your targets with a ball of concentrated flame, dealing 22,000 ish fire damage to an enemy, and healing
Healing an ally.
No, to an enemy of healing an ally. To an enemy of healing. Okay, so or healing an ally for 22,000 and granting you 5 seconds of the ancient flame buff. And every time you cast concentrate the flame, the damage or healing value is doubled up to 2 times that resets and has 2 charges. The ancient flame is a 10-second buff that increases your critical strike by 150 and your leech by 64, causing your damage and healing spells to engulf the target in cleansing flame for an additional 10% damage or healing down over 4 seconds. So that's a 10-second increased damage on a 30-second cooldown. Pretty good.
And it's a minor too, right? So
Yeah, like
you can put that in the minor slot and just get a nice DPS increase.
yeah, like the unuse just forces the proc, which could be good for Seraphim, for example.
Yeah.
What do you think, Tricky?
Yeah, I mean, it also has the benefit of like you can use it effectively offensively. I mean, offensively as well as defensively on yourself. Right? 20k healing isn't that much, but I would assume that maybe that number might be higher. But imagine if you could blast yourself like because it has 2 charges twice in a row for like 40k healing.
It would be 20, then 40.
Oh yeah, 20 and then 40, right? So. I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty low value, honestly, for me. And like, if you use it offensively, it's a lot of damage, which is obviously probably how it's gonna end up being used. But I think the minor ability, if anything, just sounds a lot more stronger. But because we have so many other really good major powers to choose from, I don't really see this one being super strong unless it's tuned very high.
Yeah, I feel like the major power is just gonna be there to force proc the minor. Like if you have a spec that is very cooldown focused, like say something like an unholy DK.
Like, I think this would be good for Prot Warrior.
Yes, I can see that. Yeah.
Because anger, because you can line it up with Avatar or Demo Shout at least, every periodic. Like if Sarah was a 30-second cooldown still, I think this would be really good for Paladin. But because it's like so misaligned now,
bear in mind, this is only a 4-second debuff. No, sorry, no, 10-second. You're right.
Yeah,
what I'm just
saying is that it would just be better for cooldown stacking if this was better aligned with Sarah.
It would be 14 seconds, wouldn't it?
But it would also it would be technically a 1 minute cooldown, not 30 seconds, because it has got 2 charges, and because the damage of healing a value is doubled, so you would almost always want to use 2 in a row.
I don't think so, actually. Because it only adds 20k damage, right? But if you were to line up every single cooldown to give you an additional 14 seconds of 10% more damage, I think you would rather have that.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we'll see how it ends up, but it seems
Sim yourself.
Something. Yeah, sim yourself.
Now this was a bit controversial.
This is one of our favorites.
This is one that people have been considering rerolling for. It's a passive. Your spells and abilities have a chance to activate Avenging Wrath for 8 seconds. When a Vision of Perfection activates, the cooldown of Avenging Wrath is reduced by 15%. We're going to assume that it's a 1 ppm. And the minor power is that it reduces the cooldown of Avenging Wrath by 16.5% and increases your versatility by 420. When you activate Avenging Wrath, you heal for 5% of your health.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that's the reason people are rerolling, by the way, the 5%.
I don't know. I mean, this sounds like a pretty strong, cool. Like you have Avenging Wrath so often. I would always be interested to see, does the guaranteed create Lighter Protector proc when Avenging Wrath procs?
Yes, it's supposed to.
Oh,
according to Sleuths.
Yeah, because this would be pretty powerful, I think. Both, but the major and minor, because you just have Avenging Wrath like all the time. It feels like it's already a short cooldown. You reduce the cooldown by 16.5%, and then every time it procs, you proc it every now and then whenever it does proc, you get a little bit more reduction of Avenging Wraths.
Yeah, you can assume that it's going to proc once a minute. So that's about that's around once every wing, right? Because with the RP, that's going to be about a minute cooldown.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know, it's interesting. It's going to be a lot of Avenging Wraths, so
yeah,
damage wise it might line up with the one Seraphim preview.
Yeah, we looked into that. And
Wally's started to look into that. It looks like it's just going to be a lot better to use both of them together.
It's not that bad now. Like it's just a few seconds off here, but.
Well, yeah, and I think the other question is that are you going to get more Hand of the Light of the Protector crits out of it, etc.
Yeah.
Can you trigger Avenging Wrath? Does it also trigger the heal bonus, right?
According to Sleuth, it does.
Okay, so
I think currently for Red Paladins have a chance to proc Avenging Wrath or something, and they have a thing that also guarantees a crit or something.
I think it's a PvP talent.
So when you have Avenging Wrath procs, it does also guarantee you the 100% crit ability that you get when you activate Avenging Wrath. So I'm assuming this would be the same if that's not a bug. So
Yeah, and I think for me, just speaking what I see on paper here on all these traits, for me, I think this is like almost like a lock, at least for a minor slot, because the cooldown reduction on Avenging Wrath is just going to be so. It's just going to be so strong.
What do you mean the cooldown reduction? It heals you for 5%.
that might be placeholder. I mean, it straight up might be 50%, and it's a lighter protector, like
Oh,
in disguise.
well, that would be really nice.
But I mean, all these numbers are subject to change. You know, the
Right.
8-second Avenging Wrath might be 4 seconds. You know, the cooldown reduction might be 5 instead of 15.
And this is the rank 3, right? So you might not get the rank 3 right away. Like you might have the rank 1, and it's only like
yeah, that's
and you might it only might be like 12% down CDR, right? Cooldown.
That's
reduction.
a really good point. Hmm.
It might be something like it might be something that rank 1 gives you Avenging Wrath when it procs. It lasts for 4 seconds. Rank 2 is 6, and then rank 3 is 8.
Yeah,
the
but
cooldown reduction might be lower as well.
So then the minor might always be the same? That doesn't sound right. I think Lincoln's right. It's just going to be lower.
No, but the minor might be, instead of being 16.5, if you have rank 1, it's 10%. If you have rank 2, it's 14 or whatever. Rank 3 is 16.
Either way, I don't think it's going to line up unless you have rank 3 with Seraphim. But defensively, yeah, sure.
5% healing.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that might scale as well. 3, 4, 5.
Well, that also means that when Avenging Wrath randomly procs, you heal for 5% of your health.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It'll be like the Argus trinket.
Yeah, that healed me for 5% on average, I think. So then with the final one, the Speaker's Boon, that you can only get from the quest, according to this. So the minor first, right?
Wait, actually, question about that. When they say you get it from the quest, is that like the first one? Like, this is the first one you're going to unlock?
Believe so.
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, the minor power is every 20-ish second, a shard of azurite erupts from the nearby ground, 12 seconds, granting you no strength while you're within 8 yards of it. It's probably a placeholder.
Yeah.
And then the on-use is that you summon 3 of those. 2-minute cooldown. Summon 3 of those. You probably get triple the strength.
Yeah, obviously. Otherwise, it would be kind of like, what? What's the point? Unless they would spawn like 1 by 1 by 1, you know.
That could work as well.
Yeah, but no, I think it's just like you get 3 of them activated. So basically, I guess if you wait for 1 to spawn and the instant summon 3, you can technically have 4 at the same time. I think it's going to be a really weak one. It's just going to be like, it's kind of like, you know, the Azure trait, Heart of Azeroth, whatever, Champion of Azeroth. If I just gave you a stacking buff every minute or something.
Oh, you mean the one that was
not a bad one?
You mean the one they nerfed?
You mean the one that was BIS for a while?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't bad or anything, but it's like
but maybe
reliably get it from any pieces really outside of the one the quest ones and the ones. But
this strikes me as like it's not great, but it's not necessarily bad for any just getting extra primary stat. It's just a cooldown with primary stat, right?
Maybe we can compare it to the Argus ring, the one that empowered the Netherlight Crucible.
Oh. Okay,
I mean, this is the first thing you're gonna get. Like literally, you're gonna do the quest. You're gonna get this one. It's like this is how essences work, and I'm sure it's gonna be one of the best rank ones there is. But you probably can't get it higher level, and then so you're gonna. It's just to introduce you to the thing. Like the passive is very simple. The major power is very simple, and you understand how it works easily. Like done, and you know how the whole system works.
By the way, speaking of Netherlight Crucible, right? Do you know what I named my spreadsheets? I named it Netherlight Crucible Underwater.
Yeah, because underwater fight.
Yep.
Nice. Well, we'll see. How about that one? I'm excited for that actually.
Yep.
So I think we're good on essences, right, Wally?
Yep.
Cool. So that was good to hear what Trekkie thinks about the essences. What do you think about the system overall? Just getting your opinion on what you've heard so far in terms of how you acquire them or switch switch them around? Like they're kind of like talents. Do you have any thoughts on just generally?
I'm really relieved that they've clarified that you literally swap them like talents. That it's so nice for me. Like honestly, like I would hate it if it was something similar to the Asteroid system. As
2
but
million to swap these.
yeah,
3 million to swap the asteroid traits. Yeah, all right, ready to tank.
But when the whole asteroid thing came out, I was like, okay, so this is the new version they're choosing to do legendary is just here basically. But the problem is you don't really have much choice. You basically just have to use whatever piece happens to drop, and the design intention with that was basically like, hey, well, in a perfect world, all of them are going to be tuned equally that it doesn't matter. Like you're just going to use the highest level of piece you use, and like mathematically they will all be basically the same. Like they're not going to do much of a difference. But that also makes they're really, really fucking boring. And even from then, I was like, well, they should make a system where you could maybe if you get an asteroid piece from a certain place, you could scrap the piece, the traits, and put them into your current one, or in a system where that was inside your. You would basically have a respecable heart instead of the actual asteroid pieces, and
So
those
like,
you could obtain from different
so
pieces.
sort of like Build a Bear, but for asteroid.
Yeah, indeed, and you could farm these. So basically, one dropped in Freehold, one dropped in from Gahoon, and if you did a normal mode version, you got one that was these numbers, and then the heroic version would have higher numbers, and you could basically just slot them in or out depending on what you wanted, and that's basically exactly what the Essence system feels like for me. So I'm really happy that I basically they had the same kind of idea just a lot later. I would have wanted them to have that instead of Asai system.
Isn't there actually something similar to that as a trinket? Like you get a trinket with a bunch of like I think you have stamina and a bunch of sockets.
So yeah, I think it gives stamina and it has 3 sockets. Basically, one gives you primary, one gives you secondary or effect, and then one is the third socket is literally just useless stuff.
Yes,
Are you talking about like the Mechagon trinket?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay, yeah. So just for those that don't know, there will be a system through Mechagon, which is a new area, where they'll give you like a customizable trinket, and they're kind of like old school gems. So like there'll be like red punch cards, blue punch cards, yellow punch cards, and they all do different things. Like I have to think like red is like primary stats, and blue is like proc effects, and yellow is like a different type of thing. And you'll be kind of like do things around Mechagon and in the dungeon.
Skeletor has it up now on the stream.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so what you'll do is you'll be able to get these types of punch cards and kind of just build the trinket you want out of these different.
You get the substats that you can choose. Probably going to be a lot more different punch cards, right? And then a proc effect that whichever proc effect you like, for your class. And then the third one seems to be completely kind of like trivial, right? Like lung capacity, tracking, mechanical. It's just whatever. It's just a fun thing because it's engineering anyway, or like it's not technical engineering, but it's kind of that feel for
that style.
Yeah, so it's a cool trinket, and I guess you can make your own one however you want it, so we don't have to rely on Blizzard designing good tanking trinkets in there.
Yeah. Right. Do you know what I'm going to tell you right now? What's going to happen? A bunch of people are going to come into Prot questions and ask, like, here are my 11 options. What do I pick? And 8 of them is going to be blue.
I do assume that most people are going to be able to get I guess you might be able to have to farm the punch cards.
Yeah, but, I think we're going to have a guide for like the go-to stuff.
Yeah, hopefully it's not as complicated as hopefully it's not as complicated to obtain as the.
Yeah, they've talked about like how you'll get there's some that'll be through like world quests in round Mechagon, like inside the dungeon, so there'll be random dungeon drops, and then other quests and things. Crafting.
Question is,
I think they also mentioned crafting as well, so you'll be able to craft some.
Yeah. Question is if there is there a different amount of stats depending on where you get them, right? Because you could have an item level on each punch card instead of the item level on the trinket right now. This doesn't feature any main primary or secondary stats in the screenshot at least, but
you're talking about like ranks.
How
Yeah.
am I gonna sign up for a group
Imagine
without having
if there's No, but imagine if there's a blue, forceful, adaptive logic card, and then there's a red. What is the next? Well, it's a green one, and then a blue one, and then an epic one, right? So the epic one would be obtained from the same place, just like kind of SSS, and would just feature more. That would be a way to upgrade your trinket, which otherwise just comes with an arbitrary item level, right? Because that one could literally be level 1 or level 5.
Just wait till the LFG requests for this must have all blue punch cards. Must have all. Must be able to breathe underwater, 100%.
But it's a really good. I think that's a really good way to get it. Like you can get the just like the essence system, right? You can get the bonus or the effect that you really, really want. But if you want the strong version of that, you might need to be a little bit lucky, or you might need to focus on this kind of content. But if you don't have time for that, if you haven't had time for that at this point of progress or whatever, then you can at least use the one that's a little bit weaker, but does give you the effect that you want. And that's what I feel like. That's what Legendary should have been in Legion. That's what Azerite should have been in like when this whole expansion started. And
If you need a trinket, just kill a boss and loot it. Hello.
Yeah.
You don't need this one.
Well, I think this is gonna. I think what they're trying to do is trying to address some of the customization problems, like how people just think they don't have enough control over their own character.
I mean, I'm gonna enjoy using haste crit and then going into progress and have to use haste mastery, and then clear the tier and then use haste crit again.
And then that means you need like 4 different punch cards. If you socket one in and out, it's gone.
Yep.
So Trekkie, you've kind of thrown in a lot of thoughts on 8.2 and kind of like what we've seen this week specifically out of the various people that went to Blizzard and their announcements and so forth. Like, where do you think WoW, and as we kind of like wrap up our discussion for today, we've been here for 3 hours, and thank you for being with us for being all patient. We did not anticipate it would be this much time, but where do you think like WoW is headed generally? If you look at all objective evidence, BFA has not been received well. A lot of the influencers are kind of moving on, and all the content creation community is moving on, as kind of we touched on earlier, and it doesn't seem like the player base is very happy with the direction of WoW right now. Like, where do you think it's headed, and like what kind of stuff would you expect in like a 9.0 or the next expansion? Like, we just aren't seeing now in terms of changes.
That's a really hard question to answer, and I'm really happy that I am not a game designer, because I actually.
So Tricky. Let's put you on the spot. How would you fix the game?
So Trekkie, fix WoW for us. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I could say whatever I want here, and it's like none of this would be put into practice, and I wouldn't be blamed for it. So
okay,
I'm
so what would
fine
you
with saying?
So, from your perspective, like what does WoW need to do to get back to say where it was in Legion or MOP or something like that? People just generally thought the game was better.
Back to where it was in Legion. Whew.
Yeah.
Honestly, well, a lot of it has. Everything with WoW has to do with the reward system, right? And I don't have perfect solutions for everything. But some of the things I would like to see would be more rewards for doing stuff like not challenge modes, but like mythic pluses. Like, I would love to see much more cosmetic designs for actually doing +10s, +15s.
Titan Forge.
That's obviously a thing as well. That I would want to like. I don't really agree with getting completely rid of Titan Forging and Warforging, but I would definitely want to limit it to some extent. And I personally really enjoy, and I read their blog posts or whatever. I personally really enjoy maxing out my gear, because the moment I'm max geared, I feel super fucking strong playing my character. I love playing my character, even though I can't get any upgrades. I love playing it because I feel strong. Once you're also max geared, you start venturing into alts. You start learning those characters. At least that's how I am, right? And you want to play the content with those characters as well. Right now, it's such an uphill battle at all times, getting geared, trying to get lucky with Titan Forge and Warforges or whatever. And it's just an uphill battle that you will never win. And then the moment new progress comes out, you're just like, oh, well, all my efforts to trying to get best in slot gear is just gone. Or I didn't have time, I didn't manage to do it. Obviously you can't do it, right?
Yeah. I remember. I remember back in MOP, right? Well,
yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you just
Yeah.
moved the thing. Yeah, I remember back in MOP where I started out raiding. Like I hadn't touched raiding until then. The first time I actually got into an organized raid group was in Siege of Orgrimmar, right? I geared myself out through LFR. I went through Flex. I went through normal. And every single time I had like BIS gear, except for sockets here and there, right?
Yeah.
Then I went to Heroic. And I kept going. Because like I felt good every time I got my BIS. But then I saw there's another difficulty. I have everything I can use here. Let's try push myself harder. Now it
Yeah.
feels more like why am I doing a 10? I might as well do a 9 and Warforge the item. At least
Yeah.
that's how it felt when Gahunis was introduced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because like it's such a small chance. That is kind of remedied a little bit by if you do a 10, you get 3 items. You do an 11, you get a slightly chance of getting a 4th item. You do a 12, you get higher chance of getting more items. So at the point
Yeah.
you get to like doing a 23, you get like guaranteed 9 items or something, between the 5 of you.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine. That's okay. But I would rather see a system where you still only get 3 items. But the moment you do an 11, one of those items is guaranteed 4 or 5. We do a 12, one of those items is guaranteed 4, 10. Once you get to a 15 or whatever, it should be exactly like rating. You do a 15 in time, well, one of those items is a guaranteed 415. It might not be a good piece, it might not even be you who gets it, but one of those 3 items is a guaranteed 15. So doing a 15, especially at least in time, right? If you don't do these in time, maybe the all loot is just automatically 400.
Yeah.
And you have your normal chance of Titan Forge and Warforged. But the problem with WoW right now, in my opinion, is that it rewards quantity, not quality. Do hundreds and hundreds of world quests, and you get the Azure power you need. Do hundreds and hundreds of Mythic Plus, loot hundreds of pieces of gear that's 400, because you need them to proc 415 or higher, right? Especially as a raider, like I don't feel any incentive to do Mythic Pluses. Technically, a piece can lucky drop and can Warforge all the way up to 415, but then I'm just annoyed that it didn't Warforge even higher, or it Warforged up to 410, and you're like, oh well, it needed 5 more levels. I was so lucky getting a 410 piece, but I needed to be even luckier to even have a use for it.
Yeah.
So I do believe that there should be more quality. You should reward more quality play, and that comes from like you wouldn't have to do a lot, but some more guaranteed 415. I feel like it's so stupid that people who do nothing but Mythic Pluses, they get 400 gear, and they just have to be lucky with 415 pieces, right? While Mythic Raiders, we just get 415 pieces tossed at us. Like all my characters are basically have 415 everywhere on all slots, just because they just drop everywhere. And to get the same for Mythic Pluses, I would have to do so many Mythic Pluses and be pretty lucky with loot as well. And yeah, it's very hard to compare. And I would rather, if I wanted to get really high gear in Mythic Pluses, that if I pushed myself and did 15s, I would at least have some guarantee that there would be loot dropping, instead of just like, well, let's just do a shitload of them and get a lot of different loots, and hopefully some of them are Titan Forge.
I would even. You said that the game rewards quantity over quality.
Yeah.
I would even disagree with that, because you need to do exactly one Mythic 10 for your 415, 410, and you need to do one Warfront a day, like one Warfront per week. Like there's a lot of like weekly reset stuff that you can't really mitigate. Like outside of Titan Forging and Warforging, 410s once per week is the only thing you're gonna get as a Mythic Plus only player, right?
Yeah.
And it just, how do you compete? Like you just have to farm like crazy.
But yeah, and that's what I mean. Like you will get a guaranteed 410, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
really cool. I really like that. I would like if there was a better system where you maybe you have 3 items in your chest and you could choose one of them.
Maybe if you did a 15, you could get 2 items instead of 1. That could also work, right?
Maybe, yeah. If you do a 10, you get 1. If you do a 15, you get 2. If you do a 20, you get 3. Yeah, I mean that could work as well. That would be pretty cool as well. I haven't actually thought of it. Which is funny because on beta, whatever, like people who did the weekly thing, they just 3 pieces dropped in every weekly chest. It's like, oh my god, this is gonna be nice. I'm gonna get some.
Yeah, and then they
But,
went back and went psych, and then even took out that right from it.
and didn't even get a guaranteed Astrite piece, and the people who got Astrite piece the first few weeks were overpowered compared to everyone else. So, yeah, I don't know, but I do think they like the just doing a lot of like the whole Titanforge system. I feel like it rewards quantity, not quality, because it just means that you just need to have. You just need to do content, receive 100 epic pieces for one of them to be Warforged enough to be useful.
Yep.
Well, I think that's a really good place to kind of wrap it up. Trekkie, you've been here, like I said, for over 3 hours. It's been a
Always
great.
fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It was great to hear, great to chit chat and talk about all this stuff. So much to talk about.
I think it got a lot longer because we just had the 8.2 thing like a few days ago, and I don't think we were any of us were prepared for that. So I think for me at least, it's the first time ever like really talking about any of this with other people and like hearing their points of view and all that kind of stuff. So it's always fun. It does take time. So
Yep. And we appreciate your patience going through all of it as well. So as we wrap up here, do you want to just let people know where they could find you on Twitch or on Twitter, social media, if they want to follow you or maybe hit you up for extra other questions, etc., wherever they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I always obviously stream on Twitch, and it's twitch.tv/Trekkie. As it is on Discord as well. My Discord is just Trekkie, so I mean, as you said before, like I'm always in the Prot Paladin Discord reading, and if you want to contact me there or whatever, just at Trekkie2180, and that's how you find. My Twitter is TrekkieWow. Very original. But that's the easiest way to find me. So I have my Discord server as well. So obviously, if you can't find me in Hammer of Wrath, it's discord.gg/Trekkie as well.
Yep. Cool. So I think so in terms of the next prod stream, as we wrap this up, we're still trying to figure that out. We have some ideas. Could be other guests beyond Trekkie. We're trying to talk to some people that are in the MDI right now to get them on to just do a deep dive on the MDI and what that's like. But given the fact that the MDI is going to potentially go on for another 2-3 weeks, potentially even into May and June, depending on the land is, we don't know when they're going to be able to come on, if at all. So we'll definitely keep, the announcement. When we're ready to announce something, we'll definitely do that. And in the meantime, we are trying to figure out other stream ideas. Maybe more of a theory crafting stream, a log review stream is pertinent right now, as well as doing deep dives on 8.2 potential stuff as more stuff comes out on what's going to happen there. So I think we're ready to wrap up. Skeletor, if you wanted to say any closing words. I think you're muted.
He's on the toilet again, isn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, we can hear you
Okay,
now.
I don't know. I guess my mic died out for some reason. Don't know why. But thank you again for being here. And as always, our info is down below. I will have this uploaded to YouTube because Twitch deletes VODs very fast. So look forward
Unless you're
to...
partnered.
What?
Unless you're partnered.
Well, we're not partnered, so...
Yeah, well, get partnered then.
Well, get people to watch the stream.
I linked it to like 3 people.
Oh, 3. Alright, but anyways, yeah, so we'll find out when the next Prot stream is. I'm not sure if there'll be a Holy stream next week, but there will be a Ret stream the following week after that, though. So the Ret stream will be on the 27th of April. And that's what I got for you. Again, thank you, and have a good day.
Thanks a lot, folks. See you later.
That's all, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.